Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. Awesome. Well, welcome to the 5th Annual CP Women's Leadership Summit presented by ICON. My name is Lindsay Hamilton. I am an anchor on SportsCenter, a golf lover, passionate about women in sport and paving the way for the next generation. And I am so privileged to be hosting the CP Women's Leadership Summit for the 3rd year in a row, but after 2 years on Zoom, back in person. And I have to say, the Zoom calls, while they're great because you can wear slippers and shorts from a home studio, it is so much better to be seeing your beautiful faces in person. So it's a real treat to be here today. We do still have a chance to connect virtually, though, and I know a lot of us are being joined via live webcast. So hello to everyone joining on the live webcast, but thank you for being here in person. Before we begin this morning as well, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land we're gathering on today. The city of Ottawa is built on the unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. All First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people are honored for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. As mentioned, today is so special because we're here gathering in person, and on behalf of Golf Canada and our title sponsor, CP, we are so excited to be here in Ottawa, not only for today's CP Women's Leadership Summit, but for the return of the CP Women's Open, Canada's only stop on the LPGA Tour, being held this week just across the street at the Ottawa Hunt and Golf Club, and this year's field is truly fantastic. 82 of the top 100 golfers in the world, including none other than Smith Falls, Ontario's very own Brooke Henderson. As many of you know, she's coming off her 2nd major title at the Evian Championship, the winningest golfer in Canada. I think I heard a round of applause. We can applaud for Brooke, absolutely. And I had the chance to talk to Brooke last week, and she is so excited to be back on Canadian soil, competing in front of a home crowd, and I know the Brooke Brigade will be roaring this week. The best part as well is you can witness the incredible talent of Brooke and the rest of the field on display this week, as everyone here today will receive a free ticket to the CP Women's Open, so be sure to go and catch all the golf in person yourself. When mentioning CP, I also would like to take a moment to acknowledge their outstanding contributions to children's heart health over the last 8 years, raising over $13.5 million towards CP's heart. Later on today, we'll have the opportunity to support the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, the charitable beneficiary of the 2022 CP Women's Open, and I have seen the work firsthand that CP's heart has done, and it is truly incredible. As I mentioned earlier, today is a day to celebrate. It's a day to be inspired by leaders at the top of their field. We are so fortunate to be joined by some of the biggest names in Canadian business and sport. And I really hope this is a day of inspiration and reflection, connection, get to know the faces in this room, mix and mingle and network. And as I mentioned, this is my 3rd year covering the Women's Leadership Summit. I've had the opportunity to cover golf in many capacities, whether it be the Masters, the CP Women's Open a few years ago, so glad we're back in person, to cover Brooke Henderson highlights on SportsCenter, and I have seen how this tournament paves the way for the next generation. I have shared in years past, working as a sports broadcaster in a predominantly male field has taught me a lot about myself and about leadership as a woman. And a question I often ask myself, I've said it in years past and I'll say it again today, is what can I do so that women after me can do more? I'm so excited for today's panels because a lot of the women you will hear from today are being a leader in their own respective spaces. A few quick housekeeping notes for today. Washrooms are located at either ends of the venues. Your meal card for lunch is placed directly in front of you, and the first break will be at lunch following our first 2 panels. We also ask that you please silence your phones, but feel free to take pictures throughout the day and get social on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. We want you to be social, so you can use the hashtag CPWLS and tag the handle at CP Women's Open. To start the day and bring a warm welcome on behalf of Golf Canada, please welcome Golf Canada's CEO, Lawrence Applebaum.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. And first, I want to acknowledge our host here today. Lindsay's been with us in our first iteration of the CP Women's Leadership Summit and then virtually. So it is amazing to have you live and in person and welcoming us here to Ottawa so nicely. So thank you, and a big hand for Lindsay and all the work she does in golf. Thank you. I get to watch a lot of SportsCenter in the morning with my 2-year-old on my lap, and I think they're watching virtually now. And to all of our friends across Canada and the US, we welcome you to the CP Women's Leadership Summit. We are very grateful to see everyone in this room and the energy that this summit brings. I first want to thank our amazing friends at Canadian Pacific Railway. Without Canadian Pacific's investment in women's golf and in the development of golf in this country, our sport would not be in the place it is today. And so we are humbled by their investment, their commitment, and the good that they do in the community. But I really have to acknowledge our friends here at CP, so thank you so much for everything you do. We have brought some other friends along with us. And as you heard from Lindsay, that this CP Women's Leadership Summit is presented by our good friends at ICON. ICON is doing amazing things in the sports space and as a partner of Golf Canada. And not only with ICON, but we also have our friends from Audi Canada, who I know will be here for us for the week, and we're so happy to have them as a premier partner. So big hand for ICON and Audi. Thank you very much. I've had a chance to speak with some of the speakers in the last 24 hours and this morning. I can tell you you're in for such a treat. Some of the biggest names in business, in sport, in philanthropy, from across Canada and the US, and from the British Isles as well. But I will tell you that this is a staff-run event. This is an event put on by Golf Canada staff with some help from some very special friends. So I'd just like to take a moment at the outset to thank our two co-directors, Laura Wilson and Whitney Gorges, for all the work they've done. Whitney and Laura. And I know they would be upset with me if I didn't mention the tremendous staff that is working around them, beside them, and supporting them for everything they're doing. So thank you all for the amazing work. Without further ado, I'd just like to say bienvenue Ottawa. It's wonderful to have everyone here, and thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. Appreciate it. And Lindsay's given me a hand signal, so I think I've already messed up. I think I have to introduce Isabelle. Oui. I'd like to introduce Isabelle Tremblay from Transition Optical. Welcome.
Hello, and thank you for coming for today's panel discussion. I'm Isabelle Tremblay, Director of Sales and Marketing for Transitions Optical at Esler Group Canada. And I'm really honored to be here today supporting a partner of CP's Leadership Women Summit. This event really provides a platform for encouraging and elevating women, which is a subject that is very special and important to me. Transitions also has a long history of creating programs that support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this year is no exception. We are actually collaborating with inspirational female leaders such as iLatum, an indigenous design house from BC that was founded by two sisters in British Columbia. And we are also so delighted to sponsor Gabrielle Ouellette. And Gabrielle is actually sitting at the transitions table, table 6 today. And we're so proud of her because Gabrielle's been living with an ocular condition since she's been born. And recently she created the Go Challenge, in which she will be running 3 marathons in less than 1 month, profiting the Eye Disease Foundation. So congratulations, Gabrielle. That's impressive. I look forward to continuing the conversation on that important message with the inspiring panelists and women in this room today. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Isabel. All right, it's time for our first panel, Power, Passion, and Perseverance. That's a bit of a tongue twister, but I'm very excited. And I'll begin by introducing Tracy Schmidt. Tracy Schmidt is a Canadian Hall of Fame inductee and the 2019 Woman of Inspiration Changemaker of the Year. She was the first four-way amputee to climb the Himalaya Mountains, is a bronze medalist in paraskiing, and a decorated athlete in World Cup sailing. Her story has been shared by Oprah Magazine as a Quest for Gold World Cup sailor competing against able-bodied men, and she is an award-winning speaker with over 100 million views. Please join me in welcoming unstoppable Tracy Schmidt. Nicknamed the Minister of Defense for her performances in goal at the Tokyo Olympics, Steph Labbé is an Olympic gold medalist and helped lead the Canadian women's soccer team to back-to-back medals. She's represented Canada in 3 World Cups, 3 Olympic Games, and 2 Pan American Games, in addition to playing professionally for 13 years before retiring earlier this year. In addition to her accolades on the field, Steph has been an important voice for LGBTQ2+ the community and an advocate for mental health awareness. Please join me in giving a warm welcome for Steph Labbé. And lastly, Cassie Campbell-Pascal is one of Canada's most decorated hockey players of all time, with 7 world championships, an Olympic silver medal, and back-to-back gold medals. After 2 unsuccessful attempts at being selected to play for Team Canada, Cassie persevered and fought to earn a spot in 1994, paving the way for a Hall of Fame career spanning 13 years. Following her retirement, Cassie contributed to be a woman in sport, a trailblazer, by becoming the first woman to do color commentary with Hockey Night in Canada's broadcast team. Please put your hands together for Cassie. Wow. I have to say, I read through your resumes, and all I can think to myself is, my goodness, these women have achieved tremendous success. But I think success is often intertwined with passion. So let's rewind the clock a little bit. Cassie, perhaps I can begin with you. Where did that passion begin? Who sparked it? Was there someone in your life that got you into hockey? Did you always love sport? What was that first aha moment?
I think it was my brother. I had a brother who was 3 years older who played hockey. And, you know, my parents back in the day, which was a long, long time ago, you mentioned me first when you talk history, because I'm the oldest one up here. But, you know, there was a girl on his team. Her name was Jennifer Minkus. And when I first started wanting to play hockey, my parents gave me figure skates, which I have no disrespect for anyone who figure skated, but I wanted the different colored skates. I wanted the black skates just like my brother. And there was a girl on his team, Jennifer Minkus, and I actually started playing hockey in the United States. I know it's a huge rivalry, Canada versus the USA, but that's where I actually started playing hockey. And she was the only girl on my brother's team, and that was my final argument to my parents. Well, Jennifer plays. And she had a younger sister, our families were really close, and finally my parents didn't have an answer back saying, okay, no, you can't play, Jennifer does play. So I did figure skating for 1 year and finally won the battle when I was about 8 years old, and I played with boys. They didn't know I was a girl until the end of the year swimming party when I showed up in a different bathing suit. You know, I had the short haircut. But it was really my family's support, you know, and maybe not initially of what exactly I wanted to do, because I think it was scary for parents to put their daughter in something that wasn't traditional or wasn't acceptable at the time to do, and they just wanted to protect me. But as soon as I started to play, they supported me. The first ever captain of Canada's national women's team in 1990, the first ever world championship, which was here in Ottawa. Sue Shear ended up being my coach at the University of Guelph, so definitely an inspiration for me. But so many people, so many women, you know, but my parents, my family, my brother were probably the most important people in that regard.
Well, you talk about your parents, Cassie, and Tracy, I know you've spoken a lot about how your mom helped kind of give you confidence as a young age, and you shared an incredible story about tying your shoelaces. So perhaps you can share that with everyone here today, and how she really gave you confidence to then carry that over into the world of sport.
I remember sort of that first day of school, and all summer my mom said, "You get to go to school today." And I was really excited, and I ended up face to face with the principal, and I'm beaming ear to ear, and the principal's just looking at my mom and I in panic. And his answer to us was not hello and welcome. What he said was, "I'm sorry. Tracy can't go to this school." And the hair on my arm standing up, and Stephanie can tell you. You know, when you have a car accident or a conversation with somebody you love, and every time you relive it, you feel it all over again, right? And like I can hear the principal saying no. And how many of you right now, as women in the room with children or aunts or neighbors, would like want to talk to that principal right now and say, "What do you mean?" Right? Yeah. Nobody would judge my mom for being a mama bear, but she wasn't. She was like the kindest eyes, and she just, with her kindest voice tone, she just said, "How come?" And so because she was not defensive, the principal explained, and it was the 70s when I was in kindergarten, and he said, "You know, because Tracy doesn't have her hands, she probably can't tie her shoelaces. And because Tracy doesn't have her legs, she probably can't go to the washroom by herself." And in the 70s, they didn't have educational assistants or teaching aides. They were segregated schools. And so my mom, she sort of said, "Oh, I totally understand." But then she counter-offered. And she said, "You know, can you give me a week to try to find a school more suited for Tracy? And if it doesn't work out, no problem." And the principal said, "Okay, 1 week." And Mom shook hands and smiled at the principal, and we walked around to the side of the school where the kindergarten kids come in. And it's right by the schoolyard. And there's hundreds and hundreds of kids in the schoolyard, and my mom's face went from a big smile to shock. And she dropped like to her knees. And she's in like her 70s mini skirt, right? Not unlike your beautiful dress today.
Don't have a mini skirt, darn it.
And so she's on this gravel ground, and I'm 5 years old. I have no idea why my mom's on her knees. But of course, what she's doing is same with the principal. She's looking me eye to eye, and she does that parental grip. You know, the 5 fingers on this side and the 5 fingers, and like she's holding both of my arms. She's on her knees, and she's looking me eye to eye, and she says, "Tracy, it's really important that you and everybody's included. Nobody left behind, including you." I'm 5 years old. I don't know why my mom's so intense. I don't realize that if I don't make it outside for recess, I don't get to stay at that school. So I break free of my mom's super grip, and I bump into the principal. He had followed us around to the side of the school, and he saw my mom on her knees, and he heard her say, "Nobody left behind." So now the principal's heart is in his stomach, and he fell in love with me.
How could he not?
How could he not? And so fast forward to recess time, and he goes outside to find me, because if I'm outside, I get to stay. I didn't make it. I wasn't outside. And it means I can't stay at that school. So he's trying to think, what am I going to tell Tracy's mom? So he goes inside and he asks the teacher, he said, "What happened? Couldn't Tracy tie her shoelaces?" My teacher's all confused, and she's smiling, and she's like, "Tracy was the first one to tie her shoelaces." Well, what happened? Oh, her little friend couldn't tie her shoelaces. It turns out none of the 30 kids could tie their shoelaces.
Hey, there you go. And for you to be able to have that support from your mother was monumental in what you were then able to do in sport. And Steph, I think that's something you can probably relate to, whether it be parents or a role model in your life. Who was that for you that perhaps helped you overcome a difficulty at any point in your career and was really that source of inspiration?
Yeah, I think I have to go along with the similar theme here. My parents were definitely, the people. I grew up on an acreage. I grew up 30 minutes outside of any type of a major city. And so my parents being that like chauffeur, driving me to and from every single sport that I wanted to play, packing me lunches, packing me snacks, picking me up from school, driving me here and there. And I was a kid that wanted to play every sport possible. I just wanted to be active. It was more of a social thing for me. So wanting to just go to, like I said, every sport possible. But at the end of the day, I was really starting to look up to my older brother. Of course, I wanted to follow in his footsteps. He grew up as a hockey player, so that was my first passion. I wanted to be just like my older brother. But similar, I faced the challenges of being a female, trying to push into that. I was the only girl on my team for many years. And wanting to be like my brother, but then also trying to pursue my own loves and passions and getting pulled from friends in school. So I think my brother really provided a lot of inspiration in terms of like, I really saw what I could become through him. But then it was my parents fostering that joy in trying new things and trying new sports, which ultimately is what helped me find my passion for soccer.
Incredible. And when you both talk about the hurdles that you overcame to get to where you are, Cassie, I know that's something you're very aware of as well. When we read off your bio, you talked about not being selected for Team Canada, not once, but twice, yet persevering. What was going through your mind after each of those, what you could deem as a failed attempt, but for you, you ultimately turned it into a success?
Yeah, not only did I not make Team Canada, I didn't even make it out of Ontario. I didn't make the list. I was 16 years old. It was the first World Championship in 1990, and maybe a long shot, but nonetheless, I thought I'm there. I'm going to try out. And I didn't even make the list of the top 20 players out of Ontario, and then went again, 92. I was 18 years old. Same thing, didn't even make the list out of Ontario. And then finally in 94, my first World Championship, I was 20. And finally made the list out of Ontario, and I thought, okay, I'm pretty good, And then I get to camp, and I'm thinking, who are all these other great players that are, I haven't been able to see before? And I remember my roommate was Jane Robinson. She's from Edmonton, Alberta. We were both going to be potential rookies at the time, and we both ended up making the team. And for me, I had a defenseman who was a veteran defenseman. Her name was Natalie Picard. And she was my defense partner, and she couldn't speak a word of English. She was French, and I couldn't speak a word of French. So it was kind of an interesting pairing. But in hockey, you have that terminology, over and different things that help you communicate and make it all work on the ice. And I remember I made a mistake in the tryout, and I came back to the bench, and I had my head down, and she just looks over to me, and she says, "Believe you belong." And, those are the first words that she actually said to me. And I'm thinking, she does speak English. She's been tricking me this whole time. And I have used those 3 words throughout the rest of my life. Like, when I first started with Hockey Night in Canada and Ron McLean would throw to the different cities, and you would have, at the start, you'd have 45 seconds to tell your game story. And then about 10 seconds before you went to air, they'd say, no, you only have 30. And then about 5 seconds before you go to air, they say, no, you've got 10 seconds, 10 seconds. So you're like, you just went from 45 seconds in your brain down to 10 seconds, and you got to spew out something that makes sense to the country, and you really have no idea what you're going to say. And I would say, believe you belong. And I would stand there, and I'd just spew something out, and you'd hope it would make sense. But those 3 words helped me make the team that year, and have helped me in future events and things that I've been able to do.
Believe you belong. I'm going to write that and refer to it regularly. Tracy, when I think believe you belong, that's something you've talked a lot about in how sometimes it was hard to feel that way as a quadruple amputee and trying to belong in spaces with some other able-bodied athletes. How did you overcome that hurdle internally and believe like you do always belong?
Yes. I think, believe you belong and earn that independence. And I remember my journey with sailing when I decided I wanted to pursue Paralympic sailing dream. I phoned a gazillion people to say, you know, how do I pursue this? And every single one of them actually said, there's no way. You know, most of the other sailors that would be competing against me are missing a foot, or they're missing a thumb, or maybe they're paralyzed from the waist down. And I call that paper cuts. And it is sort of.
There you go. That's tough. That's real tough.
It was a tough love. Yeah. And they said, there's no way. $10,000 for a boat, 10,000 hours in training. There's just no way. And so I kind of said, well, it's impossible unless what? And they said, it's impossible. There's no way. You need to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the back pocket of a gold Olympian. And my response to that was, do you know any? And so they said this man, Magnus Lidgedal, and he was a gold Olympian in Miami in the able-bodied world. And I packed up everything I owned, my bed, wall unit, anything that didn't fit in my car went on Kijiji. And 5 days, if it didn't fit in my car, it was gone, and I drove down, and I arrived in a parking lot in a boatyard where I thought Magnus was working out of, and the sign said, shake a leg. I'm like, there's a sign, I'm meant to be here. And Magnus wasn't there. And so I parked my car and I hide my car between a couple of multi-million-dollar yachts, you know, who you surround yourself with. And I slept in my car that night, and I woke up at like 5:30 in the morning with the sunrise. Guess who's washing boats? Magnus. And I run over to Magnus, and I'm Tracy, I'm sorry that I emailed you and tweeted you and LinkedIn you and phoned you, and I didn't mean to be harassing, but I'm Tracy from Toronto, and I want to pursue my Paralympic dream. And Magnus had the same reaction you're all having. And he had a totally different energy, and I'd forgotten my mom's kindergarten lesson, right? She didn't tell the principal I could tie my shoelaces. Right? She heard him say that essentially he was worried, and if it didn't work out, no problem. Well, Magnus was washing boats. So then I took a deep breath, and I regrouped, and I reached in, and I grabbed a sponge, and I started washing and waxing the boat with Magnus. You all know this movie. So for 3 months, I was hiding in his boatyard, sleeping in my car, 5:30 every morning, washing and waxing boats with Magnus.
Wow.
Before I believed I belonged, and he finally said, let's go sailing.
Good for you. That's an incredible story. And putting yourself in such an uncomfortable situation in order to achieve success long term, I can imagine, isn't easy. And Steph, we talk about uncomfortable situations. I want to go to a very vivid moment that I'm sure a lot of Canadians can remember well. It's you standing on the PK line, smiling, laughing, and you looked so casual and down to earth in what was probably one of the biggest moments of your life. Were you truly cool as a cucumber in that moment? Was that just an act to look a certain way and try to intimidate the opponent? What was going through your mind in that moment, and where did that confidence come from?
Yeah, first and foremost, yes, it was like quite genuine and quite, I think, authentic, the smile that came out. Rewind a bit, you know, throughout my career, I've struggled with mental health and had a lot of challenges through that. But one thing I truly believe is that through those challenges, I was able to surround myself with an amazing support system and gain some incredible tools to help deal with really challenging times. And so as much as, you know, in the Tokyo Olympics, I was going through some major struggles off the field. You know, I was going through panic attacks and anxiety attacks. I wasn't able to go to the meal hall to eat. I couldn't be around people outside of the team. For the most part, I was like hiding out in a dark room. But for some reason, every time I stepped on the field, that was like my safe space. That was my comfort. That was where I'm the most confident in myself. And so in that gold medal final, you know, I had all of those tools and resources to deal with any type of adversity that came my way. I had a lot of confidence because we had won the quarterfinal in a penalty shootout, so I had a confidence in myself that I would be able to come up with a save, but at the same time I had confidence in my teammates that they would be able to put the ball in the back of the net. And I remember just being on that line and thinking, like, this team has already made incredible history. We're in this gold final, which has never been done before. And I also remember I know how powerful body language is in two different ways. Number one, the power of body language to give to my team confidence, to show them, like, I've got this and I'm gonna give all of my energy to you guys. Because let's be real, as a goalkeeper, I have the most energy than anyone else. They've been running around for 120 minutes. I have not. So whatever I can do to give them that little boost of energy, to give them that confidence. So I wanted to show that. I wanted to breathe that and live it. And at the same time, I knew that that confidence could affect the opposing team. When a player is walking up to take a shot, what I want them to do is look at me. I don't want them to look at where they're going to shoot. I don't want them to, think about their process and exactly what they need to do to score a goal. I want them to be focused on me. And so by smiling, trying to make eye contact with them, moving around, if I can just get them to look at me for a slight second, that's a slight second they're not thinking about their shot and thinking about what they need to do. And so it was quite genuine. I was happy. I was in the moment. But there was also a little bit of games going on.
Wow, the mental side of sport is always truly so fascinating to me. But I want to touch about the mental health aspect, because Steph, I know you've been quite open about that. And I'm sure that was probably somewhat difficult to even identify early on. So can you talk about that experience? Because I think sometimes we look at success from an outside perspective and we think they must have it all together. They don't have any internal battles. Their life looks perfect. Here they are as an Olympian. How did you first identify that? And then how did you balance that challenge of being successful on the pitch, but then going home and still battling internally?
Yeah, I think when I look back earlier on in my career, the first, I think, pivotal moment where I was really dealing with mental health was in 2012. I had been on the national team at that point for just over 4 years, and I had been a backup goalkeeper that whole time with the national team. So, in 4.5 years, I had maybe played 5 games for the national team. I was behind 2 incredibly experienced, 2 of the best goalkeepers in the world. But for me to try to find my place, to feel like I belonged, was really challenging. So I lost a lot of self-worth, a lot of confidence. I thought if I'm not playing a lot, maybe my coaches don't trust me, my teammates don't trust me if I'm not playing. So there was a lot of those internal battles going on. And so I kind of hit a point where when I was with my professional team, I had a lot of confidence, but anytime I went in with a national team, that's where I lost a lot of that confidence, and I didn't have that self-value. And it started to become really draining on me. I was emotional. It was really hard to find the motivation to step out and work hard, because I thought, well, it doesn't matter what I do on the field, I'm still not going to play. So that became a bit of a negative, vicious cycle. So at that time, I decided to step away from the national team, and I ended up stepping away for just over a year. And I think at the time, I had no words to describe what I was going through. I didn't understand. I had never heard another athlete talk about it. So I really didn't know what I was going through. I just thought, I'm sad, I'm upset, this isn't fun. And I think stepping away, number one, was the best decision that I could have ever done. Looking back, it was a challenging year. The team went on to win a very historical bronze medal that year. So not to be a part of it and knowing that was my choice was really challenging. But from that, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about how to find confidence from within, to not look for it from coaches, from teammates, from external things. So finding that ability to find the confidence from within was huge for me. So then fast forward another 4 years, the Rio Olympics was my first tournament as a starting goalkeeper, and coming away with the bronze medal there was really my first taste of success. And once again, I went from that complete high to going back to my pro club, where I had been the starter all year. And after the Olympics, I went back and sat on the bench for the rest of the year. So going from an extreme high to extreme low really posed another challenge on me. But at this time, there was another athlete who started speaking out, and that was Rosie McLennan. And she spoke out about her mental health journey after that Olympics. And I remember for the first time, I connected to something. I connected to words that she said, and the power of hearing her story and being able to relate that to me, I think was something that really inspired me to think, if she's telling her story and I'm able to relate to it, how impactful could it be if I tell my story? And I think that was one of the moments where being able to put words to feelings was so powerful for me. So the more that I could do that to help others is really what inspired me to continue to speak out.
Incredible. Well, I know I can speak on behalf of this entire room that we are so thankful you did share your story, because you are a role model for so many other people who are experiencing something similar and perhaps don't know how to identify it or how to battle what it's like to have success in one space, but then also internally dealing with their own emotions. And you're a role model for the next generation. Cassie, you are as well. Tracy, you too. And something I think, Tracy, that you can probably relate to, especially being a role model for the next generation of people who might not be able-bodied. And a lot of the time they don't see role models that look like them in the space of sport. What has your experience been like talking to younger athletes who might be struggling in that area? And how do you think we as a society can encourage more representation in that space?
I think it's really important that we all kind of embrace that exceeding uncertainty. You know, feeling uncertain is no excuse for inaction. And when I get to share stories, people identify with that idea of they're afraid, or I don't know if I can do it, and then they hear the impossible breakthroughs that I was lucky enough to have happen because of the perseverance. And so I think that exceeding uncertainty is no excuse for inaction. And you know, I failed my first summer sailing, right? I knew the parts of the boat, I knew the points of sail, but I kept falling out of the boat because of not having legs when there was wind or heeling. And it turns out if you can't stay in the boat, you can't get your level 1. But the next summer, I learned how to balance in the boat by looking ahead and reading the water. And it turns out that's an advanced study skill. And I got my bronze 4. And then I got my white sail level 3, 2, 1. And so I think a lot of us feel like we're drowning and that we're just doing our advanced study backwards. And so we need to exceed uncertainty. Feeling uncertain is no excuse for inaction, and that's my message with all people, particularly youth with disabilities.
Wow. And I love how you tapped into embracing the feeling of uncertainty,
yes.
Because sometimes we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable,
yeah.
which is not easy. Cassie, I'm sure that's something you've experienced, whether it be in the world of hockey or in the world of broadcasting. And later this afternoon, we'll talk to Arlene Dickinson about Reinvention, a book she wrote. What was that experience like for you moving from the hockey world into broadcasting? Was there ever a point that you didn't know if you could do it? Did you have to convince people that you could take on this role? What was that process like for you?
Well, I think it was very obvious early on that I didn't go to broadcasting school. And normally you start with your local cable TV, but I just thought, wow, I'll just go to Hockey Night in Canada and see what happens. But my first day on the job was the Battle of Alberta. And my very first interviews, they used to tape them because they didn't want to embarrass this show that has been excellent for 60 years. And they also knew I was a rookie. And they understood that I knew the game, obviously having played it, but I don't think they had a correlation of women's hockey player and men's hockey player and the similarities and how many guys I trained with and knew in the game. So they were unaware of maybe how much I knew and how involved I was with the NHL players in that. But my very first interview was the Battle of Alberta, and it was 2.5 hours before the game. Craig McTavish comes out. He's the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers. And they're in my earpiece, my telex, which I had no idea was called a telex. When my audio guy said, "Do you have your own telex?" I was like, "What's that?" So that's how green I was. And he's like, "Well, that's an earpiece." And I said, "Listen, say earpiece, microphone, like I get that kind of stuff.
Don't use the lingo.
Telex and whatever else." So there I am, and my producer, Tim Davis, is in my ear, and he says, "Okay, Cass, it's going to be from Ron to Ron." And I was so nervous, right? Like, here I am in Hockey Night in Canada, it's the Battle of Alberta, and I'm like, "Timmy, what does that mean?" And I'm thinking like a scientific term like ions, like I'm just sort of, that's going through my brain, like what is he talking about from Ron to Ron? And the simple explanation is that Ron McLean is gonna throw it to me. So at the top of my interview, just say, "Thank you, Ron," do my interview, and then at the end, "Back to you, Ron." You get that, how that goes, right? It's like so simple, from Ron to Ron. So they're all like in the truck probably going, oh boy, they've hired a good one here, right? And so I'm like, okay, Timmy, just say that. From Ron to Ron. Don't say ions and whatever else you say. Just say, explain it to me. And so anyway, he goes 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, Ron. I'm standing here with this guy, and I couldn't remember Craig McTavish's name. I was just like, oh no. And I know him, and it's 4 syllables, Craig McTavish. Like, it's like an easy name, you know? And his reaction was to just lean over, and he gives me a hug. And it wasn't like a creepy, icky man hug, you guys. It was like actually kind of really comforting. You know, sometimes we do need hugs, you know? And he says, Cass, I've got 2.5 hours before the game. We're good, we can do this again. And in my ear, they're saying, he's never hugged Scott Oak before. So I knew I was kind of in, you know? I was like, okay, I got this, you know? And then my second day on the job, I fly to Toronto, and I really, truly have no idea what I'm doing. I had some experience doing women's hockey when I was playing, and I would, you know, volunteer at breakfast television show and fill in for the co-host and just something to do, right? Like, while I wasn't playing. But I had no idea, and there I am, but I knew the game. I knew the game of hockey. And when you're a player, you want to be a color analyst. You want to be a panelist. That's your goal, right? Like, with all due respect to being a reporter, I'm an athlete. I have no idea how to be a broadcaster, and that is the most hardest broadcasting role within our business, I would say. And so for me to be in that role to begin with was their mistake. But
no, you're being humble.
My next weekend, I fly to Toronto, Calgary at Toronto. It's like a huge audience, right? West Coast, East, you know, it's big. And they take me to one side of the Air Canada Centre, which is now Scotiabank Arena, and I think they're playing a rookie joke on me. Like, I think, okay, something, here it comes, right? And so they say, listen, Harry Neale isn't going to make the game tonight. And Harry Neale and Bob Cole used to sit up in the booth, and I don't think they ever missed a game in 35 years. Until my second day on the job, Harry decided to miss the game. And I said, oh no, you know, what are you guys gonna do? And he's like, well, you've done women's hockey in that role, so we think you can do this. And I was like, what? Like, but that's what I wanted to do, right? I'm like, holy smokes. So I immediately call my husband, and it wasn't for his approval, but I just wanted to make sure someone was gonna love me after I embarrassed myself in front of 6 million people on a Saturday night. And you know, his reaction, and women in general, we need to be better at this, I think. And we're getting better, but I think generally we need to be a bit better. He goes, do it, right off the hop. He's like, do it. He's like, you may never get this opportunity again, just do it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. Yeah. And I did it, and I called an NHL goal before it happened. I'm talking to Bob Cole, and I said, Bob, we gotta watch Darcy Tucker far post, the Leafs on a power play. He scored 17 power play goals last year. They love to set up the 2-on-1 down low, and that's their bread and butter, boom, right? And he's like, okay, Cassie, and there we go. And Matt Sundin wins the faceoff back to the point. It goes down to the goal line to Kyle Wellwood. They set up the 2-on-1. He puts it across to Darcy Tucker, and he scores. Wow. And Bob looks at me, and he's like, and I look at him, I'm like, and I thought I could not say another word the entire broadcast. I just called an NHL goal before it happened. And I got ripped that whole next week in the Toronto media. And my poor father, I lived in Calgary. My poor dad, you know, he's driving to work, and he's like, and Cassie Campbell, she was so terrible, and like her voice, and dumb woman, and she never played in the NHL. So he finally calls me, he's like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, why? He goes, because they're just ripping you here in Toronto about the terrible job that you did on Saturday night. I said, oh, Dad, they have no idea that I got thrown into it last minute. Harry Neale's been doing it for 35 years. It's a new voice. But the interesting thing is, they had no plan of giving me color opportunities after that. But they did, right? And now I do it full time. So can you imagine, like, not saying yes to that moment? So, let alone, I embarrassed myself in front of 6 million people, but here I am 16 years later, so it's not so bad.
No, an incredible story, and you absolutely deserve to be in the space you're in. A couple things stood out about your story, Cassie. First, when you said when you're thrown in, you don't know the terms. I remember one of my first, it was top and tail, and I'm quickly Googling. I'm like, what is a top and tail? I have no idea. Is this an animal? Like, I'm supposed to do this thing in half an hour and do a top and tail, so I have been in that space. And then what also struck a chord with me is when you said you called your husband, and he just said, do it. And I think you really you hit something that I think resonates with me a lot, because you're right, women are getting better in that space of encouraging each other, but we do sometimes have that self-doubt and imposter syndrome, which we've all heard before. Steph, Tracy, I don't know if one of you could maybe speak to that. Is that something you've ever experienced, being put into a situation that felt beyond your control, beyond your capabilities? Someone else obviously believed you were capable of being in that position. But did you ever struggle with imposter syndrome, and how did you overcome it? Tracy, do you want to jump into this one?
Oh, I'm almost feeling it right now, sitting next to these two incredible athletes in this room full of many athletes and sports represented today. It's phenomenal. You know, I think that idea of embracing possibility, you know, can I do it, and how can I do it, and not knowing how. And I think for myself, like when I started skiing, we didn't know how I would ski. And my legs end above my knees, and we tried skiing with my long legs, but every time I got on the incline, my knees just bent and I would wipe out. And then we tried a sitting ski, where it's like a chair on skis and there's outriggers, there's crutches with skis on, but because I don't have my hands, I just wiped out. And I remember being in the lunchroom after lots of wipeouts that morning, and I looked over and my ski instructor, he had gigantic feet. And I'm inappropriately thinking how big his feet are. And then I get this light bulb. He's got huge feet. I can put my thighs in men's ski boots. And we tried forwards, and ski boots are angled, and I wiped out some more. So then what we did is we put my thighs in men's ski boots backwards, because I'm knees to skis. And it put me in the skier's tuck position. And so sometimes we want to embrace that possibility, and we want to think out the plan and strategize. Okay, I'm going to research. But you can't research four-way amputee skiing, right? We need to, imposter syndrome, sometimes even if we don't know how, we don't know how I'm going to ski, but I knew I was going to ski. We don't know how. We need to just get started. We need to just jump in. We need to just do it. And don't avoid failure. So embracing possibility doesn't mean you know how.
Wow.
It means you believe it, and then you jump in, and you'll find your backwards boots.
Mm-hmm. And back to even what you said earlier, in putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations and kind of stepping out of that little bubble we protect ourselves in. But Steph, I think helpful in doing that is having a team of support around you. I know your teammates have been integral to your own success, but how do we as women, especially when we're looking to encourage the next generation of athletes and young girls coming up, encourage them to surround themselves with a group of people who are going to help them get over the imposter syndrome, who are going to be like Cassie's husband and say, just do it? How do we get that ball rolling for girls?
Yeah, I think the challenge right now is the visibility and the exposure isn't always there. You know, as we're all aware, the professional environment for women in Canada is very, very rare. There's not very many professional opportunities for women of any sport here in Canada. And so for me, I think a big thing is to be able to see, like dream it, you have to see it. And so if we want to help athletes find that circle of support, we have to show them that it's possible and show them that it exists. So that's something that I know, you know, I'm taking into my retirement is to, I'm doing a lot of work behind the scenes right now to help build a women's professional soccer league here in Canada. But in order to make that happen and show kids that their dreams are possible and show them that, you know, this can be possible here in Canada, we have to continue to do that work to make that visible and to make role models and idols visible to them, because the more, you know, we tell our stories and the more that we show that it is possible, the more that, you know, they're not just going to have to watch it on TV once every 4 years. You know, for young kids to grow up and to see it every single weekend, week in and week out, to see their idols in whatever sports they are. But to be able to actually see that, I think that's the biggest power in order to see what's possible.
Well, visibility is huge. Sorry, Tracy, you were going to jump in.
Well, and tell them what you did in 50 days and 30 camps across Canada.
Yeah, I mean,
I know it's pretty incredible.
Exactly. When I first retired in April was my last national team game, and I made a pact to myself that I was going to expose the rest of Canada to the excitement of the gold medal. So, you know, we won in empty stadiums in Tokyo. We came back to a less than exciting homecoming. Number one, in terms of the pandemic was still happening, but also, as I said, as a Canadian, we don't get to come home after an Olympics. We have to go back to the United States or to Sweden or Germany or England to where we play professional. So that excitement of the success from an Olympics doesn't come for us. And so for me, I knew that I wanted to bring that excitement across Canada. Number one, to share that, but also to feel, I think, how much we were able to impact this country. So as soon as I retired, I made an announcement that I was going to be running camps across the country, and I ended up spending 50 days running close to 37 camps from coast to coast, all the way from Victoria to PEI. And doing that and being able to not only share the gold medal, but just share my experiences, share my stories, and give that exposure to these young kids was one of the most inspiring things that I've ever done for myself. I was inspired by all of these little kids, and I think to see the impact that we had on this country is so far beyond, I think, what we really, truly understand.
Wow. Well, I know you're each individually in your own way inspiring the next generation. And Steph, saying visibility matters, it truly does, whether in able-bodied athletes, whether in the mental health space, whether it's doing things for the first time and being a woman on television in a space where a woman hasn't been before. And Cassie, I think when it comes to girls in sport, and obviously we're celebrating golf this week, we've seen a huge number of girls come to the game of golf. We're seeing more girls involved in sport, but then perhaps drop out of sport in their teenage years. So I want to ask you, as someone who's been in sport as an athlete and now as a broadcaster, what do you think is the most significant positive change we've seen in the last 5-10 years? But what do we need to do better to encourage girls in that space?
Well, first off, Tracy, both Steph and I were talking about how inadequate we felt sitting here with you prior to this whole thing. We met her like 20 minutes before we all came up here, and we're just like, oh boy, why are we even up here, you know?
She could just be our speaker. We'll
yeah, she could just do this whole thing on her own. It's an amazing story, and your courage is unbelievable, so thanks for that today. But I don't even remember what the question was, but...
Sidetracked. Well, just talking about
yeah, well, you know, we're not a cause.
Yeah.
Like women, we're not a cause, right? Like there's great causes that are represented in this room and that we should all be fighting for, but being a woman isn't one of them.
Amen.
Like, hello, like our sports are good. People are watching them. What was the women's soccer game that just had 87,000 people, a Euro?
The Euro final.
Like, hello, 87,000 people. It was the most ever of any soccer game at that stadium, right?
Yep.
I'm not just making stuff up here. And like, we're not a cause anymore. And I think the conversations, you know, even these women's leadership summits, I've noticed over the last decade, the conversations are just changing. They're more positive about where we should be going in sport, in business, as a woman. I think we see more men, good job, boys, for coming and supporting, and not only supporting, but learning about some of the differences that women face when we're trying to be professional athletes or trying to move up that corporate ladder. So that's the big thing, is that don't ever get stuck in that we as women are a cause, you know? And I think believing that women's sport in particular, and obviously I'm biased to that direction, we can be good business models, right? But we need the belief in that first, because there was a time when men's sports started years ago, and people believed in men's sports, and they got behind it, and they were willing to take risks. They were willing to lose money to help build it what it is today. And so I think we definitely need to start talking more about how women's sport can be great business. Not just good business, it can be great business if we all believe in it like we believed in men's sports at one time.
Well, can I ask a follow-up there then? Because I think there's a lot of parallels between the world of hockey and the world of golf, and gaining popularity, and soccer, of course, and sailing. And there's a lot of parallels, but in particular when it comes to growing the game in this country, you say support it. What does that look like? And how can we as a community help provide that support?
Talk about it on social media, buy a ticket when there's an event. There's over 70,000 people, I think, coming this week, which is the most, if I'm not mistaken. I'm taking someone's notes, I know for sure. But you know, there's going to be 70,000 people coming. Watch it on TV. The ratings are important. They're important for sponsorships. And even if you're in the kitchen doing something or you're downstairs working out on the Peloton, put the TV on. And I know it's not good for the environment maybe and electricity bills, but put the TV on and have those ratings count. And again, push for it. Push your business leaders in your communities, push the people who have money in your communities to support women's initiatives and support sport. And if they're supporting male sport, ask them, do you support women's sport? How? Why? Why do you only support one or the other? How can we learn from why you do that? Let's start asking each other more and more questions, get to know each other a little bit more and what our projects are and what our initiatives are. And don't allow people out there to think women are still a cause. I think that's a stereotype that we've been stuck in for such a long time. We are important, we're powerful, we can do great things, and in particular sport, because we're totally biased sitting up here, we deserve to be on front page news. We deserve to have TV times in proper prime time locations. Like TSN, I work for Sportsnet, but TSN, how many channels do you guys have? Like 25? And Sportsnet, we have like 25. And so why are we always watching men's poker?
Thank you, thank you.
Like, and sorry guys, like I don't get it. I really just don't get it. And they'll say, oh, well, it doesn't get sponsors. Well, how do we know? And that's believe in it from that standpoint. How do we know? And yes, it might be a risk. Yes, it might not work out right away. But that was the same in men's sports long ago. We just didn't know about it, right? It's history. They don't talk about that part anymore.
And Cassie, you say like you need to put that television on. You need to take your young girls and young boys to these events. And yesterday, even, I know we both had the opportunity to play in the Golf Canada Foundation Pro-Am. And there was a young boy with his dad, and he was asking everyone to sign his golf ball, and that's what you need to see. And we had this great conversation. He was talking about his favorite woman on the LPGA tours. And it's even having those conversations, I think, with your children, and not only saying, yeah, my favorite athlete might be a male, which it very well could be, but also throwing in other women that you looked up to as a kid. And we talk about visibility and how representation matters. And Cassie, you said, what's nice about these leadership summits is we are moving in a direction where we're talking about the positive change. And Steph, I think that's something you've probably noticed as an advocate in the LGBTQ plus space. So maybe you can speak to that and what your experience has been like. And have you noticed more acceptance in the last 5-10 years? And how do we continue to move that momentum forward?
Yeah, I think, you know, I've been really fortunate to grow up in a super supportive family with supportive friends around me, and then to be in a sport that is extremely inclusive. So for me, you know, I didn't have a whole lot of resistance necessarily, but I know that, you know, by me being very open with who I am and kind of dropping the, I guess, the fear of what people think of me, being able to be so open, obviously, like I said, was very easy because I was surrounded by such a safe, supportive network. But I know that has impacted now in the past couple of years. There's a lot more talk about the trans community being in sport. And, you know, with the national team, my roommate and very close friend came out as trans 2 years ago. And so I think providing more inclusive spaces for that community, I know has been kind of more of the recent talks. And there still is a lot of resistance. I know it's a very polarized subject and there's a lot of opinions on either side. But I think it's, along with everything else we say, it's talking about it. It's getting the conversations out there and creating safe space to have opinions and to understand and to hear other people's thoughts. And just create spaces for everybody to feel included, because we all know how powerful sport is for every single person of every background, of every ability level, of every gender. And sport can have some really powerful moments in life and can teach you some incredible lessons that really transcend beyond the playing field. And so I think it's about continuing to have conversations and providing a voice to those athletes to speak up and providing that safe space.
And in providing that safe space for athletes, for the business community at large, Tracy, we've touched on it a little bit, but perhaps you can dive in on how we can reimagine what a quote-unquote athlete looks like. How do we help shift that perception? Because for a long time, and we talk about women in sport, I think an athlete was a male athlete. A broadcaster was a male broadcaster. I vividly remember the first time I saw two women hosting SportsCenter together. And it was strange, and I had to do a double take. And now I host a national show with another female anchor, and I have been for 4 years, and no one turns their head or thinks twice. But it took a while for that to become the norm. And Cassie, you talk about even doing color. It took a while for people to get used to listening to a female voice. And Tracy, seeing athletes who might not look the way people thought they were going to look. How do we reimagine what an athlete looks like?
And what's coming to mind is I worked for the Para-Pan Am Games in Toronto 2015, and I was thinking, you know, all of the games, all of the Pan Am Games were on the media, but the Para-Pan Am Games, we needed to pay to get media coverage. And I'm so glad that that was part of the Olympic Committee's focus, was to make sure that we spread awareness and get that on the TV too. And I'm thinking of, I was in December of 2015, before Rio 2016, in Melbourne, Australia, there was an Olympic class qualifier, and there's not enough boats on a start line to really get authentic practice for your starts for a race. So I went to the Melbourne Olympic class qualifier, which was an able-bodied qualifier, and there were 30 sailors, 27 of them men. Sailing is a male-dominated sport as well, and 3 women, and I was one of those 3 women, and everybody had their arms and their legs. And you'd think that nobody would be threatened by me being there. And at first, I don't think anybody thought I was in the race. Like, I think I'm on the dock, what's she doing on the dock? And then when they figured out I was on the dock, and then there was a boycott of me participating in this qualifier. But I could completely understand that they've been living at least 12 years or more, 24/7, for this qualifying moment to get their spot with Rio, and they didn't want me cluttering up their start line. Mm. But in my mind, I didn't even think about, they don't want me there because I'm disabled. I'm meant to be there. It was just an automatic. And so I asked how come? Right? And they said, it's a one-class design. And I had chartered a boat because it was too expensive to fly my boat there. So I had a pool noodle to wedge my knees in, and I had some duct tape on some part of the boat to facilitate my left arm. And they said, this isn't one-class design. I'm like, oh. And so I just like ripped off the tape and ripped out the pool noodle and joined. And even if I was 30th out of 30 in that race, I would have been 30th out of 30 in the world, male, female, black, white, with a disability, without a disability, or invisible disability. And it was very light winds, and I came 7th against all these able-bodied folks. And so I think, you know, how do you do whatever it takes. Right? You just be there. You get in the booth and you broadcast and you get on the start line, whether you're female or not and able-bodied or not. Like we need to empower people to be present in those integral moments.
And just show up when that space is provided to you.
Yes.
Which somewhat goes back to even what Cassie was saying, you know, with that opportunity to do color when it pushes you out of your comfort zone and you hear a just do it.
Yeah.
And Steph, is there a moment in your career at any point when you had to push yourself out of your comfort zone? You're like, I don't know if I feel ready to be in this moment, but I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, I can think of a few. One that really comes to mind is in 2018, I hit a point where at the end of 2017, I had a rocky end with my professional team. And so 2018, I was trying to think of, you know, what can I do this year to take my development to a new level, to do something different? And it was challenging because at the time, the way, it still works this way, but the way that the US League works is if you don't want to go back to your same club, they own your rights. And so the only way to go to another team is to get traded. And my coach at the time refused to trade me, but he knew that it was an environment that I couldn't go back to. I had already played in Europe for 6.5 years, so that to me wasn't something I wanted to do. So I was trying to think outside the box, and I'm like, what can I do that's different? And I had this, what I thought was a bright idea to go try to play for a men's team in Canada. And so I was calling up all these coaches across Canada, and all of them, nope, can't happen, nope, can't happen. How are we supposed to do this with the locker room? Nope, can't happen, the boys will never accept you. And finally this one coach said, sure. And his name was Tommy Wheeldon, and he is now the coach of one of the men's professional teams in Calgary. And he said, come on out, I'll only judge you based on your ability, not on your gender. But going in, it was one of the, I had always spent off seasons training with the boys, but going in to know that I was, competing against them for a spot, that was really challenging. But, my whole entire support system was just like, you've done this before, just go. Like, what does it matter? This coach has an open mind, so just go, just go. And I remember, like, the second I walked in, the boys just like treated me as one of their own, and held me to the same accountability, held me to the same standards as they all held. Yelled at me in the exact same way, and it was
That's when you're really in, when they're ribbing you and chirping you. You're like, okay, I'm in.
Exactly. They were chirping me and like I said, holding me to the same accountability, and I ended up thriving in it. Like going in, it was so nerve-wracking, but I just completely thrived in feeling like. They were just seeing me as an athlete, as a player, and to go and feel that freedom of just being able to express myself in that way on the field was one of the most amazing experiences. And I grew more in those 6 months as a player and as a person than I could have ever done in any other environment. And yeah, it was quite an incredible experience.
And amazing that you show up in that space that is predominantly male, and in broadcasting, it's a predominantly male space as well. And you talk about, you really know you're in when you're chirping and ribbing each other back and forth, and that happens in the newsroom. And I actually found in my own experience, once I reached a higher level of success, the men accepted me and supported me because they knew I earned my stripes to get there. But in the path getting there, that wasn't always the case. And Cassie, you've had your fair share of experience working in predominantly male worlds, whether that be broadcasting or in hockey. Golf can be predominantly male at many times. What advice would you have for someone who maybe feels outnumbered or in an uncomfortable position? How do you overcome that?
Believe you belong, right? I that's really been sort of my philosophy. And not that I've never lacked confidence in a situation. I think I'd be lying if I said that was true. But I've been really fortunate by my colleagues, by the people I work with and my producers, and you know this, we're seeing more and more females behind the scenes as well in television. But when I first started it, there was maybe 1 or 2 behind the scenes and maybe 1 or 2 on the air, and in hockey in particular. And I just think we kind of stuck together. And from my male colleagues, I've never been made to feel like a woman. I've been always made to feel like I'm a hockey person. And I was fortunate because I was an athlete, and a lot of the guys that I would cover, they grew up watching me play. So when I walked into the dressing room, they were like, hey, Cass, what's going on? And they would start telling me stuff, and I'd be like, you don't want me to share this, do you? Like, you don't want me to tell this story? They're like, no, we're just talking. And I remember there was one story in particular where I was with Kelly Rudy and Scott Oak. We were doing a show called Bell Making the Cut. And this was years ago. It was a hockey show where they were going to try and find the next superstar in hockey. And we picked up a gentleman at the airport, and they were in the back seat. And they allowed this gentleman, who was an older generational male hockey player, to sit in the front, because that was what they should have done. And I was driving. So I think he looked at me like I was some sort of eye candy, picking him up at the airport. And I think that was what his reaction was. And a man of that generation, for some reason, felt that he could get away with saying whatever he wanted to say. And he said it. And my 2 colleagues in the back seat, Kelly Rudy and Scott Oak, blasted him right off the hop. And they started like, hey, so-and-so. I almost said it.
Everyone's like, like, no, I'm not going to ask.
So-and-so this is Cassie Campbell Pascal, and they started listing off all my accolades, whatever they call them, resume. And you could see his face. But it was like, for some reason, he thought, even if he didn't know who I was or whatever, not that I think I'm anybody, what gave him the right to say that? But I wasn't going to say anything. I really wasn't. I was just like, okay, but my colleagues did. And I thought that was a huge moment where, I knew they had my back, but also just a moment where we sometimes need men to speak up on our behalf. But by my colleagues, honestly, they always have invited me out for dinner. We arrive in our cities on Friday nights, usually for a Saturday night game. It's a group text. I've never not been included. And I think the best way for me to describe it working with Hockey Night in Canada is that I've never been made to feel like a woman from my colleagues. They just treated me as a hockey person. And when I first started, they didn't know anything about really my background and how much I knew about the game other than the fact I played on the Olympic team. So they had to learn how much I watched growing up and how much I knew about the game and how much I studied the game and how much I watched all the time anyway. And so they had to learn those things, but they were willing to do it. But that one moment where my two colleagues stuck up for me in that, and knowing it was really uncomfortable, was something I'll never forget, for sure.
And I think it's so impactful for the women and men in this space to have the confidence to be the person when it's not you to speak up for that other person.
Yes.
And I think that can go to a number of different lengths, whether it's calling someone out for inappropriate behavior, whether it's kindly even intercepting when someone's interrupted in the midst of their conversation, or course correcting a conversation and not being a bystander. Because I think there's so much power in not being a bystander. And Steph, you've talked about your teammates and having that community around you. Is there anyone that stands out in particular as a role model or someone you looked up to growing up that just left a lasting impression, or words of wisdom or a motto, or like Cassie even said, a memory where you're like, that person and what they did for me, I will never forget this moment?
Yeah, I think I look back to when I was around 14 years old, and at this time I had made the provincial team, and I was starting to get selected to go into a high-performance training center where we'd get scouted for the national team. And I remember there was a U16 national team camp. It was the first time that I had an opportunity to be selected. And I remember the national team coach came in, watched us train for a weekend, and then about a week later, the roster came out and my name wasn't on it. And I remember going home and being like super upset and talking to my dad about it. And I remember he said, just go in and tell your coach he made a mistake and you'll prove him wrong. And I was like, I can't say that to this man, Dad. Like, and he was like, why not? He's like, just go in and say it and then go on the field and train. And I was like, Dad, I'm like 14 years old. Like, I can't tell this grown man that he made a mistake. And for some reason, I don't know what it was, but my dad gave me this voice, and it was like I was possessed. And I walked in and I walked straight up to the coach, and I had this like probably, zombie face on me. And I just said, you made a mistake. I'm going to prove you wrong. And I turned and walked away. And he, like, this coach still, talks to me about this. He still remembers this moment, and he tells the story now. He's like, I don't know, some 14-year-old little girl told me I made a mistake. And it's like I remember that moment so vividly that, my dad gave me that voice and gave me that confidence to say that. And, 6 months later, I was invited into the next camp. Maybe he was scared to cut me again, I don't know. But yeah, I remember just like having that, getting that confidence from my dad of like speaking up for yourself and not only saying it, but then going out and doing it. But that moment is so vivid for me.
Wow, I love that. Before we quickly wrap up, perhaps a quick life motto or something you've wrote down, because I think Believe You Belong is something that's going to be a little earworm for a lot of people for years to come. Is there a motto you've written down on a piece of paper, something you refer to? We talk about, having confidence even when we're dealing with imposter syndrome. Is that a power pose? Maybe we can go down the line, Tracy, starting with you. Something you go back to often just to give you that mindset of, I believe I belong.
I believe I belong. I can't begin to imagine what everybody's facing in the past couple of years that's been going on. But I know, and no one would judge me for not doing a lot of the things that I do. But what works for me is no excuses. And so I know when I live a life of no excuses, I get to live a life of no limits. No excuses, no limits.
Mm-hmm. Don't put a cap on yourself. Don't put a ceiling on yourself. I love that. Steph, what about you?
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, I have it tattooed on my arm, is just be you bravely. And I think it's, for me, it was all about being my authentic, genuine self and creating that space where I can just be the most bold version of myself. And that's where I could be the most confident, free of version of myself that I could be.
Fantastic. And Cash, you gave us Believe You Belong, which again, I think will be a powerful one we'll all remember. But is there something else, or even, I don't want to call you out, but
I like to sing.
You like to sing.
Yeah.
And before we went up today, you said, I sing beforehand. And maybe you can just share, what does that do for you? And how does that ease the nerves?
I won't sing, but
I thought you were going to give us
like
some.
an athlete, you know, we listen to music often just to pump ourselves up. So I still do that in broadcasting today, very badly. And I forget that they're actually in the truck listening to everything I'm singing, which is kind of embarrassing. But, you know, I have 3 square plaques in my office at home that I look at. And one is of my daughter doing the monkey bars when she was in grade 1. And she tried forever in kindergarten. She kept falling, and, you know, we all were there, right, back in kindergarten. And then finally she did it. And I actually caught the picture of her going across. And then, so I have that. And she's 11 now. And then I have a saying, taking care of yourself is productive. Because I think we neglect ourselves, especially as women, often. And even men, too. I think we push ourselves to these ridiculous expectations of who we should be. So taking care of yourself is productive. And if you don't want to be criticized, say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing. And those are my 3 things that I look at, you know, when I just feeling kind of crappy or just need some motivation.
And sometimes Toronto media will suck, and you just got to block out the noise and keep staying on your path and know that you're kicking butt.
Yes.
Oh, amazing. Well, can I have one more round of applause for Cassie, for Steph, and for Tracy? Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and your insight in those stories. My goodness, I will remember a lot, and I took a lot of great nuggets of wisdom. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Wow, I feel like I learned so much from that, and that's just our first panel. We still got a whole day to go. My goodness. Our next panel features 4 senior leaders from both the sports marketing and corporate communications space. Karen Myers is the Executive Director of Corporate Communications at the RNA. As the global governing body of golf outside the US and Mexico, the RNA also stages amateur and professional championships, including the Open and the AIG Women's Open. Karen is responsible for the RNA's communication strategy and storytelling, including brand campaigns, media relations, and digital channels and production. Karen's focus at the RNA is to make golf more accessible, appealing, and inclusive to ensure the sport continues to thrive 50 years from now. Please join me in welcoming Karen. I'd next like to introduce Pam Arpin, the Vice President and Chief Information Officer at CP. In this role, Pam is responsible for redefining CP's digital strategy and information services roadmap. Pam leads a diverse team focused on discovering and implementing new technologies that return competitive advantage. In 2019, Pam was named the Railway Woman of the Year and one of Canada's most powerful women, Top 100 by the Women's Executive Network. In October of 2020, Pam became the company's first Vice President of Innovation and Business Transformation. Please give a warm welcome to Pam. Next up is Caroline Lavallee, a board member with the Heart and Stroke Foundation. Caroline is a communications strategist and the president of Catalyst Communications, a consulting firm she founded 2 years ago after having spent over 20 years as a consultant and leader in public relation firms and in large organizations across a variety of industries. In 2018, Caroline was presented with the Heart and Stroke Distinguished Service Award for her dedication and for providing a significant contribution to the foundation. And in 2019, she was the recipient of the Government of Canada's Volunteer Awards in the Community Leader Quebec category, recognizing her leadership in developing solutions to social challenges in the community. Please welcome Caroline. And lastly, please welcome Lisa Ferkel, the Chief Marketing Officer at Golf Canada. In this role, Lisa is responsible for all marketing, communications, and digital efforts across the organization. Prior to joining Golf Canada, Lisa spent more than a decade growing Scotiabank's hockey sponsorship program in her role as Director and Head Canadian Sponsorship Marketing. Lisa was a key member of the team that negotiated the transformational $800 million MLSE partnership expansion, which included the naming rights to Scotiabank Arena and the official status of the Toronto Maple Leafs and Toronto Raptors. This year, Lisa was named by the Toronto Star as a woman of influence, making an impact in sport, and in 2018 as one of the publication's most influential women in hockey. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Ferkel. Okay, here we go. I mean, I'm so excited for our panels. I'm just jumping right in. I talked to our sports panel about their successful resumes, but my goodness, in the world of business, I am just sitting with some icons beside me. And Pam, I want to start with you because you've experienced a lot of growth in your positions at CP. Perhaps you can talk about what has led to that success, because we throw out the word success and we talk about perseverance and passion, but was there a role model in your life that led to that? What did that process look like for you?
Sure, and first, just wasn't that an amazing first panel? That's hard to follow. Yeah, you know, in terms of success for me and my role model, it was my dad. So, you know, when I grew up, I was telling everybody this morning, small town Saskatchewan, grew up in Radville, Saskatchewan, for anybody who's from Saskatchewan. Graduated.
I hear a little bit of applause. I think so. Yeah, we got some Saskatchewan.
Graduated with 12 people, including myself, 6 guys and 6 girls. And, you know, if you wanted to, I played every sport because, listen, there wasn't enough people. So everybody had to play football, right? Everybody had to play soccer. I curled, I played volleyball, you name it. And, but my influence from my father was in so many ways. He grew up very, very poor. And so, but he taught me, like, we had to do everything. So he was a principal of a high school, but in the summer he would paint to make extra money for the family. So guess who went out and helped paint barns? I was there with him. He was very active in the community. He coached baseball, so I was in the dugout with the team, keeping score, listening to all the cussing and spitting and swearing very early in life. And anything that had to be done around the house, if the shingles on the roof needed to be replaced, we'd be on the roof replacing the shingles. And so I never grew up feeling different, I guess. I did everything. My mom was a nurse. She worked 24/7, so my dad was the one that, you know, would be cooking dinners and doing different things for the family. And so it was interesting for me that it was actually someone else that pointed out to me, actually in my career, they're like, did you notice you were in a room of all males? It wasn't even something I initially even thought about because I'd been brought up to do everything and anything I ever wanted to do. That's just the way I was brought up. So I think, you know, some of my success is just the way that I was brought up. And I'd say a couple other key things for me is curiosity. Why? That's all my team ever hears from me. And just being super curious and wanting to do different things. I've been in every area of the company, commercial, operations, finance, customer service. I'm now in IT. And it was all led through just being super curious and wanting to know more and just having a voracious appetite for learning. And I'd call it either courage or confidence, but just being willing to go into that unknown. And I heard a little bit about that in the first panel, that as women sometimes we don't, you know, do something until we check all the boxes off, right? And so for me, it was having that courage to take on roles, including my current one, where, you know, I know I don't know everything, and that's okay, because I have confidence in what I do know, and I know what I can contribute. But listen, it's baby steps. Sometimes you take a few steps back, and I know even with this role, you know, I was meeting with my leader, and he was trying to position this role with me, and he's like, well, what do you think about going into IT? And the first thing that came out of my mouth was, I know nothing about data centers and I know nothing about cybersecurity. Like, that's the first thing I said. And then after, I'm like, why did I say that, right? If it hadn't been someone who frankly is a sponsor and an ally, they might have just walked away and said, well, okay, clearly she's not interested. But here I am today because I have that sponsor and I have that person who believed in me, frankly, more than I believed in myself. And so sometimes it's taking those steps, but having courage, having curiosity, and having support.
Wow, amazing. And I think that resonates so much with our earlier panel too about, whether it be sport or in business, pushing yourself into that uncomfortable area, having advocates who speak on your behalf. Lisa, I saw you nodding your head when Pam was talking about curiosity. And I think perhaps this is something you can relate to because moving from Scotiabank into the world of golf now, you get to be curious about a whole new sport and growing the women's game. What has that transition looked like for you, and how have you seen women rise in that area as well?
Well, I think yesterday was a big day. We have a 12-year-old that qualified for the CP Women's Open. We have 5 junior girls, so that means 18 or under, Canadian girls that are playing in this tournament. It's a marketer's dream. Mm-hmm. The women's game is on the rise. It's no surprise, or it's no secret, I should say, that the game of golf in Canada is on a trajectory like never before. The pandemic, Lawrence first said to me, it may have been because of lack of choice, but you know what? Let's galvanize this. Let's be opportunistic with the growth of golf right now. And we did some research, and we found out, do you know that 61% of returning golfers are women, and 51%, and another 70% of those new players are women, and 80% of those are actually aged 18 to 34. I mean, the game itself in Canada is growing like never before, but the women's game is growing like never before. So, I'm just so excited to be part of the growth of the sport and a special talented team like Golf Canada. Amazing, I love it. And I love that you say just that percentage of women who are coming back and back because they love it. But it's also, it needs to have support from the men's side of the game. And Karen, I know last night at dinner, we were talking a little bit about moving into sport, what that looked like for you, and then also having those allies. So can you speak to that, about how important it is to have male allies when trying to create a space in sport?
I think it's incredibly important that men put forward women, that they support them and they act as mentors for them. I'm actually the only woman on the executive team at the RNA. There will be more, for sure. But in bringing a woman's voice around a table of 7 men, you've got to do that with the support of the men too. And I've been lucky to have colleagues, and it came up in the earlier panel, who are not measuring you based on whether you're a woman and they're a man. They're measuring you on your skills. And therefore, what I brought to golf at the RNA was a perspective from the outside. Yes, I'm a corporate communications person, and so it's my job to be able to view the world as others see it, but also my job around that executive table as a woman to bring that other voice. And in having those mentors and leaders internally who push women forward, that's got to happen at every level of the organization. And I want to give a shout out actually to Whitney, who's already been called out by Lawrence, but she took part in the very first of the RNA's Women in Golf Leadership Development Program. And we've talked a little bit about women playing sport, but just thinking about women working in sport, from the outside, it doesn't, other than perhaps us showing the difference, but it doesn't look on the surface like a sport with lots of women working in it. I may be a lone voice around the executive table, but actually in the RNA, 50% of the workforce is female. But what we noticed is that there are not women progressing up the ladder in golf organizations around the world, at every level of golf. And so we created this program. Whitney was in the first intake, and it was designed to give women an opportunity to shine and to learn some of the skills that help them in their careers. We're now about to start the 6th intake, so Whitney was definitely one of the pioneers. Over 100 women who've been through the program. and many of them have been promoted or gone on to other things as part of that. And that was all championed originally by 2 men and 1 woman in the organization that made it happen. So I think it's really important to have those champions, and for those champions to be visible, for those champions to push those women forward. And also for women to be champions of other women. Sometimes that's a really hard thing to do. I came into sport from an early career where in the Automobile Association in the UK, a predominantly male organization, very, very traditional. And after 21 years there, I moved into publishing with Time Inc., a predominantly women organization. And actually, I found, with respect to many of the strong colleagues I had at Time Inc., that in a women's world, women are not always the greatest advocates of women. So I think when you're looking for a male mentor, which is really important, it's actually really important to have female role models too. And that's why programs like our leadership program are so important, because those alumna of that program are actually helping each other now.
And I think that level of support is so critical. It's funny, I see it both in the workspace and in my industry, but I also see it on the golf course, probably more so than ever. I've had the pleasure of playing golf with Lisa before, and golfing with a foursome of ladies is the best thing ever, because you could shank a ball, you know, you don't even get it off the ground, you don't tee it up right, but it's like, that's okay, get another one, you crushed it down the pipe, great shot, good putt. It is so encouraging. And it's so easy for us to do that on the golf course, but it's not always the case when it comes to business. So Caroline, how do we as women encourage other women better? Is there any practical advice or a real story that you have or something you've witnessed and you thought to yourself, this is what women supporting other women looks like?
Yes, so many ways, so many examples that I could give, but I'd like to share with you a piece of advice that a communications leader shared with me at the very beginning of my career, and it even became a running gag in the team. She kept repeating over and over and over, never assume, don't settle. We'd roll our eyes, but today I'm so grateful she shared that thought with us. And what she meant by that is, don't assume that others understand what it is you're trying to achieve. Don't assume that others understand how you feel. Don't assume that they know what it is that you need. Don't assume that they understand the kind of support that you need. So my advice, and using that information today, is go out there, ask for help, ask for support. And I'm glad I heard about reaching out to not only male support or male colleagues or male mentors, but female as well. So, and that advice that I received has really helped me to think more creatively when it comes to overcoming an obstacle, solving a problem, finding a solution. You learn to think more than outside the box. I like to call it looking at the 12 sides of the cubes. Why 12 sides? Well, there's 12 outside and 12 inside. So by trying to look at alternative solutions, we'll find the right one, and we'll find the inspiration and the support that we need to move forward and get whatever it is we want accomplished, because we can accomplish anything we want.
Wow.
If I could just add to, you know, in my new role, and again, I came from the business side, I don't have an IT background, I'm now leading a multi-billion-dollar company as a CIO. I have found great allies in the community of Calgary. Many CIOs, male CIOs, have reached out, and I meet with them regularly every couple of months, and I'm just absorbing, you know, and they're spending time with me, and it's been the most amazing thing. And also, you know, in terms of large corporations, there's only 2 other women CIO in Calgary. And we're going to get together and have some wine in September. So creating a network there as well. And, you know, how do we encourage more women to go into technology? It's been real eye-opening for me, not having been in this field and coming into it the way I have, to just see how we have to encourage more women come up through this field. So I feel extremely blessed to have allies and support very early on in taking this role.
And we keep talking about allies and just how important they are to have with other females, but other males as well. And I think something that maybe can be difficult at times is how to carve out those relationships with males. I think something that has helped me in a lot of spaces is sports. Sports kind of immediately breaks down that barrier and we're able to connect. Golf has been another great equalizer as well. We're all on the golf course, drop your ball if you need to, but keep playing through. Lisa, do you have any advice in how we can perhaps carve out those male-dominant relationships too, so that we have that support and that allyship in a natural way?
Yeah, I'm going to tell a little story. Last night, we were all getting to know each other a little better and I was speaking with Tina. So the next panel you'll hear from our women of color in golf. And I was speaking to Tina, who comes from Black Lives Matter Golf, and I said, well, how did you get involved? Like, what prompted this organization to resurrect itself? And she told me, it really was the George Floyd a couple summers back. And I started telling her, she allowed me to be really vulnerable, and I started telling her about my experience with George Floyd. And one of my best friends in the entire world is a person of color. He's been around, I call him my big brother. And I used to say, I don't see color, like when I look at you. And he said, actually, I want you to, because you want to acknowledge that I am treated differently sometimes. That doesn't mean you're not, that doesn't mean you're racist, Lisa, if you say you do see color. It just means that you acknowledge it. And so I think that form of allyship translates to men as well. So male allies, I want them to be inclusive and treat me the same and not be sexist, not be racist, but I want them also to embrace me for being a woman and all the benefit that brings, the different perspective, because we're all better with diversity of thought and diversity of experiences. And so I love that my peers I'm like you, one of 2 women on the executive team, but the men, Lawrence, Garrett, Kevin, John, they don't see woman when they look at me. They're very inclusive and they appreciate me and uplift me and value me for my difference of thought.
And I love that you came at it from a place of learning, because it was like, okay, how can I learn about this then and be open and receptive to that? And I think looking out here, I see a lot of men in the audience who also want to learn, how can I be an ally? How can I support women in this space? And Pam, I know that's something you've talked about. So are there any practical tips for the men in this room today? How can they support women better? Is there a way that's really struck a chord with you in which you thought, that's what women need to help us have a seat at the table?
Yeah, and I think just what I was speaking about is just be available. If, utilize your connections to help women as well. Like how I met some of these CIOs was either through direct contact and having courage to reach out, but I also met them through some of my vendor connections and, them saying, listen, I see you're thinking about this particular technology and why don't you speak to this CIO and I'm going to connect you. And so take those opportunities to help create those connections and it helps pass it on, right? And so be available even if you don't have that expertise. You probably know someone who does, and just make sure that you're taking that opportunity to either be a direct or I'm going to say an indirect ally through your connections and helping women to foster those connections as well. So we can help pass it on as well.
And I think a quality of a leader too is letting other people know how they can support you the best and then how you can support them. And it's having that open conversation and that dialogue. And obviously a thing we need to talk about today is leadership. So Karen, maybe you could let us know, when it comes to leadership, what ideal qualities do you think make a leader and how can we foster those qualities?
I think the first thing is to make sure the team knows that you always have their back. I think for me, the buck stops with me. If I'm going to delegate, if I'm going to give somebody an opportunity to shine, I'm also giving them an opportunity to make a mistake. But they shouldn't fear a mistake, because if they make that mistake, that's down to me. And I will always stick up for and defend the decision that I made, not ask them to defend that decision. I think the other thing is to be a listener, and if my team were watching this remotely from St Andrews in Scotland, they would probably say that I don't listen quite as much as I would like to think I do.
That's honesty. Kudos to you, because I don't think we all admit that.
I talk quite a lot, but it is really, really important to listen to everybody's opinion and also to balance the differences that people have. And those differences can come from perspective, from experience, they can come from their home background, they can come from what they're experiencing inside at any given time. It could be a mental health issue, as we've discussed earlier. And to learn to juggle those strengths and weaknesses. So for example, if you're building a team to work on a particular project, don't build that team with everybody who's the same. That may be a comfort zone for them, but mix it up. Bring in the people who will challenge, bring in the people with different perspectives. And also, I think, finally, is to think of the word team, and we've got, with Steph, what great teams. We touched on the Lionesses earlier. The bringing in people into teams from other backgrounds. So my team is all the stronger if I look across the organization and think laterally and say, well, who else could add to that team who isn't part of my team, who I'm not the leader of? Multifunctional teams, I think, bring the best rewards for everyone.
Well, you talk about a diverse team, and I love that you went there because, Lisa, you obviously hold a very senior position in golf. And it's important to have diverse teams when it comes to race and gender, even able-bodied. What perspective do you think you see things through differently because of your gender? And how has that helped you? And at any point, has that hindered you?
If anyone who knows me knows that I smile a lot, and it's genuine.
All the time, and it's great.
All the time. I smile a lot. And I have a very good friend and mentor in a woman named Jackie Ryan. She's a partner of ours at the Canadian Olympic Committee. And she said to me once, she gave me the best advice I ever got, because I was nervous. I worked for her at the bank, and I was nervous that, I was too outgoing. I was too happy all the time. I was too energetic, too passionate. And she said, and I thought I had to contrive to the bank and be more serious and stoic in order to make it in financial services. And she said to me, never lose the Lisa. Mm-hmm. Never lose the Lisa, because you do it the best, better than anybody else. And to me, that's about being authentic and genuine about to who you are, and just raw and real. And I think that women do that better than anyone. We're not afraid to be vulnerable. We're empathetic. We're not afraid to show compassion. I like to tell my team that I'm the type of leader that prioritizes culture above all else. I'm a culture catalyst. And I love what you said, what does that mean? That we have each other's back. We trust each other. We respect each other, and we're never going to let each other down. And those make the strongest teams. And that's my favorite part about being a woman, is that I can be my authentic, vulnerable self all the time.
And having the confidence to bring that authentic self into whatever space you're in. And Caroline, I know something that's been so important to you when talking about your authentic self is your work within the community and giving back, whether it be through Heart and Stroke, Women's Heart and Brain Health. How do you as an individual bring those things that do champion your authentic self and give back to the community and bring it to whatever space you're in? How can we do that in our own respective workplaces?
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you're asking that question, because we've been discussing being authentic, being who we are. And for me, giving back to the community is very closely tied to who I am and to my experience with heart disease. And the good news is I still live with it, but I've overcome it, and I live quite well with it. So relate to something that is near and dear to you, something that you believe in. So for me, I chose Heart and Stroke. It was a natural thing to do. So giving back to my community today is natural, and it's part of my DNA. And why do I do it?
Because it feels great. In fact, it feels awesome. Think about it. Something as simple as opening the door for someone at the supermarket. It's a simple gesture, but it feels good if you see a smile on a person's face. I also chose to give back to the community because it's about people. It's about human beings. You see the name of a charity. It's not just a charity. It's not just a cause. There are people. There are human beings that need our support. So that's why I got involved. Now, with regards to heart and stroke, you did talk about heart and stroke's work on women's brain, heart and brain health. And that's really, really critical. Why? Because every year in Canada, 32,000 women die as a result of heart disease. That's huge. And also because while heart disease and stroke are the main cause, the #1 cause of premature death in women, only 2/3 of clinical research is focused solely on men. So this needs to change. Now, with my background in communications and with my experience with heart disease, for me, it just makes sense. It's a fit for me to help raise awareness about this and prevention too. Prevention is key. Prevention can help save lives. Now imagine if just sharing 1 or 2 little pieces of crucial information can save a life, or perhaps has saved a life, and you don't even know about it. Personally, it makes me feel like a superhero, the idea that maybe I saved somebody's life somewhere. So I encourage you today to be a superhero, to be a leader and an advocate for women's heart and brain health. And how can you do that? Just by telling those women and those you love, you care for around you, and even colleagues, strangers, that, hey, did you know that you can evaluate your risk factor as a woman just by visiting heartandstroke.ca? Hey, did you know that you can save a life if you are able to recognize the FAST, F-A-S-T, signs of a stroke? So they're just little gestures, but that can make a huge difference. All that to say that regardless of your background, you're able to give back to your community with your own set of skills, experience, and just giving back some of your time. So go ahead, be happy and happier by giving back. Why? Because countless studies have demonstrated that people who give back to the community are happier. So I'm super happy.
I mean, I feel like this is just words of wisdom. Like, okay, get happier, give back, be your authentic self. This is amazing. And I love that, you know, whether we talk about golf or the space of giving back to the community through all your tremendous amount of work in that space, how that also feels true to yourself. Mm-hmm. And you've been a leader in that space. Mm-hmm. And I quickly do want to turn a little bit more to leadership, Pam, because while it's amazing that we're able to do this type of work in those spaces, that comes easier for some than others. So how do we overcome that initial hurdle where it might not feel natural to be a leader for everyone, and that might really make us feel uncomfortable? Are there certain qualities that we should try and be developing in ourselves and in our teams as a leader yourself?
Yeah, and you know, we were talking a little bit about this last night.
I know, at dinner I'm like, I kind of want to dive into this.
I know where I'm going to go with this question. So, you know, for me, it's confidence, and particularly for women. You know, there's been a lot of studies done saying that women, we tend to have a trajectory of growth and confidence over time, whereas men are just born with confidence. And so how do we replicate that for women? How do we get young girls to feel that confidence? And I'm not saying it's like that for everyone. I feel like I was pretty confident when I was younger based on how I was brought up. But, you know, I mentor a lot of young women, and I see it like almost every time with every woman in different ways is just confidence. And again, like, I don't know everything, so I can't apply for this role. Or, you know, it's, you know, saying, you know, I was talking to Lawrence, I was talking to him this morning, and he's like, do you golf? And I'm like, oh, I can't be at a golf event and say I don't golf. And I was like, a little, but I'm not good at it, right? And so as women, we tend to downplay and don't express our confidence in the way that we should. And so for me as a leader, it's how do we build that up? How do we create that confidence early? Because we are all amazing, and you're seeing the amazing panelists, and we deserve a seat at the table just like everyone else. And some of it is just how we express ourselves and having that pivot and change in language that can create that change. So I'm, really focused, particularly in my mentoring, in how to create that confidence younger, earlier with women. So.
And can I ask if there's a practical example of change of language that you're referring to? Because, you even mentioned the golf space, and while I spoke earlier about how women can be amazing champions and they're cheering you on and letting you know when you hit a really great putt, women can also be very apologetic on the golf course, which can sometimes transfer over into the business landscape as well. And I think a lot of women are maybe even intimidated by the sport of golf sometimes. And I'm not good enough to play. I would have to drop my ball too much. I'm going to slow us down. I'm sorry, I'm so bad. I'm guilty of doing it myself sometimes. And it can be fun and lighthearted sometimes, but other times it's important to give yourself the credit where credit is due. I'm learning. I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone. I'm trying a different sport, and it's really fun. What does that verbiage realistically look like to you in the business space?
Yeah, and whether it's sport or business or anything, never apologize. That's one of the things I never actually do anymore. I will never apologize. It'll be the first thing I think of, but never, ever apologize. And I think you kind of talk to that. So, in terms of confidence, we tend to lead with that. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not good at golfing. How about we do best ball? Instead of, to your point, saying, you know what? I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to have fun. I'd love if you gave me some tips on how to golf better. I'm a beginner, but I'm just out here to enjoy myself. And perhaps you're going to create a golfer out of somebody, right? Because they're going to have a more positive attitude about the game, about business, about where they're going, right? And so never apologize, any of you.
and it's okay to make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
I had an excellent ally, mentor, male when I first started my career at the Toronto Argonauts, who used to poke fun at me all the time. And I said, why do you always make fun of me? He said, Ferkel, the second they stop making fun of you is the second you need to worry, because that just means they care about you and they love you and they know you can kind of take it. And so sometimes I just poke fun at myself too. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to laugh at yourself sometimes, and it's okay if you make fun of yourself.
I would even say that having the ability to laugh at yourself, make fun of yourself, to me, it's a sign of confidence. I'm confident enough and I'm humble enough to be able to laugh at whatever situation, whether on the golf course or off the golf course, and you can actually have a blast laughing at yourself. And I think that when it comes to, it all comes to confidence, to believe in oneself. Who is it earlier that said, believe you belong? And I think that in the end, it's all about that. And there's so many girls and women to whom I would love to say, you've got this. You can do this. You've got what it takes. If others have done it, you're able to do it too. It's Nelson Mandela who used to say, it all seems impossible until it's done. And I think this applies to all aspects of our lives. It's a question of believing in oneself, really. Another person that I truly admire is Rosa Parks. I hope you know who she is, and if you don't know who she is, her number is 7053. Look it up, and you'll see why it is that I admire her so much. She had the courage to do something, knowing what the serious consequences would be for her. So it's about believing in yourself and standing up for what it is you believe in.
Wow. And I love that you have that visual representation as a daily reminder. That's incredible. And Lisa, you made it's such a good point too about how often it is, you know, that chirping, being part of that club, you know, letting your self-expectations down and just relaxing and allowing yourself to enjoy it along the way, which is so important. And Lisa and Karen, I know you both work heavily in the marketing space around golf too. And sometimes, you know, we talk about maybe the intimidation factor as keeping women away from the sport. Are there other challenges that really stand out to you when it comes to marketing the game of golf and trying to grow it, particularly amongst women?
I think there's no doubt that whenever we do research, the barriers to entry for golf apply, whether it's reaching out to women or people from ethnically diverse backgrounds. And that's always about, there's nobody else that looks like me or is like me doing it. I can't get there because I need a car. It's too expensive. I'm going to feel intimidated on the first tee. And I don't want to be I don't feel I belong in a traditional golf club that plays 18 holes. Well, our view in the R&A is that you don't have to play 18 holes on a traditional golf course to be a golfer. There are lots of other ways to get into golf. Picking up a golf club can take you to a driving range, to Top Golf, to adventure golf, to putting, even e-sport. And I think that for women, and when I talk about women as well, I talk about families, because I think the role of young people playing sport with their families, everyone who loves golf knows that it's probably, other than horse riding, the most intergenerational sport you can have, where a 6-year-old can play with a 90-year-old on the same basis, and the handicap system allows for that. But also that if you bring your families to golf, then from a health and well-being point of view, not just the being in the outdoors, but sharing that experience together is really important. And the starting place for that is not going to be as a member of a traditional golf club. It's going to be through other formats of the game. It's okay to play 3, it's okay to play 6. And one of the things we've done in the R&A, and in the UK, it's not uncommon for there to be municipally owned golf courses around the country. And in Scotland and in Glasgow in particular, the local council was closing down a number of golf courses and selling off the land to build houses. Now, in some cases, there might be some environmentalists who think that's not a bad thing. I think for golf, it's not a great thing because those open spaces are so important. And so what we did was we bought one of these golf courses that was closing down, and we're turning it into a family-friendly golf facility in a very challenged area of the biggest city in Scotland. And it's going to have all the kinds of facilities that I just talked about, along with street food, a creche, paddle tennis, because again, you're going to bring your family along. There may be other things they want to do other than try golf. And you know, that's something that we would like to see that model roll out, and I'm sure Lisa can talk about this too. The really important part of transforming golf is to get golf facilities to transform their business model, because it's only by doing that that we'll see the change. If you carry on doing what you've always done, you'll always get what you always have had. And if you're prepared to revisit your business model and look at how, as our purpose in the R&A is to see golf thriving 50 years from now, it will only thrive if that kind of change comes about.
And Lisa, I see you shaking your head. How do we transform that space?
How do we transform that? By being inclusive. And you know, sometimes, like earlier we were talking about imposter syndrome, and you had asked me what the transition was like moving from hockey to golf. And I'm going to pick on Lawrence for a second in my interview. I ask this polarizing question in interviews, and it's polarizing because people think, well, you're just pointing out more of your flaws by asking this. But the question is, are there any gaps in my skill set that I've yet to address? And if so, please tell me now, because I'd like to address it. I don't like to have any regrets. I don't like to leave anything on the table. And he said to me, he said, your golf IQ. And you have to understand, I was in hockey, but I was playing golf 50 times. I played 50 times last summer. I was very lucky. I took advantage of the pandemic and was out there whenever I could. But he was right. Like, I needed to learn the business of golf. I needed to learn the sport of golf. I didn't know what a plus handicap was. Like, I don't play with anyone who shoots consistently under par. So I didn't know, but I also looked him in the eye and said, that's probably the easiest thing to fix, because that's so easily fixable. And I think it also comes back to self-awareness. I try and be very self-aware. I want to know where my opportunities lie. I don't just want the positive reinforcement and the positive feedback. I want to know where there's a developmental opportunity. So I think inclusionary, self-awareness, I just said a lot of things there.
No, I think that's fantastic. And I love that as an interview question as well, just to blatantly put it out there and say, where is that area? And Pam, I feel like you're about to say.
With women that I mentor, I always ask the question, what is the worst thing that could happen, right? What is the worst thing that could happen if you went for it? Okay, well, I could get a no. Okay, but you're going to get a no, and then you have an opportunity for feedback, right? So feedback's a gift, yeah.
Wow, I love that. Surprisingly, our time has come to a conclusion, which this panel flew by. But before you all leave us, I would like to do something similar as I did with our sports panel. Maybe we can go down the line, because whether it's a takeaway like a great interview question or a nugget of wisdom or words to live by, is there anything that you would just like to leave with the audience before we depart today? And something that you think could really benefit this audience? And Karen, I'll start with you.
One of the things we were asked to think about beforehand, which we're not going to have time to do, but I'm going to use that bit of prep that I did in my mind, was to talk about a book we've recently read. And it sounds like a terrible cliche that I should be reading a book about women and sport, but it's true. I have been reading a book called Game On by a woman called Sue Anstice. She's British. She founded something called the Women's Sport Collective. And her book is, while dwelling on what's happened in the past around women's sport, is eminently positive. And I think that would be the message that I would leave, which is game on.
Now I want to get out in the golf course after you say that. Pam, what about yourself?
I was thinking about the quotes from the last panel, and one that sticks with me, and I think it's applicable to golf, although it's a hockey quote, is, your worst shot is the shot you don't take. And I say that to anybody, including my children. So, and I think as we were talking, it just made me think more about that.
Your worst shot is the shot you don't take. I love that. Yeah. And your worst round is the round you don't play.
There you go.
Get out there on the golf course. Caroline, what about yourself?
Sure. For me as well, I'd like to talk briefly about a book that I've read over and over and over, and it's Travis Bradberry's Emotional Intelligence 2.0, so emotional intelligence being our EQ. And I love how this book teaches us how to manage emotions. Not just our own, but that of others as well. And I think that in life in general, even on the golf course, it's very important that you're able to manage your emotions, because it can go up and down, right, during a game. And they teach us skills such as self-awareness, social awareness, self-respect, resilience, and so on and so forth. And I think that these are skills that are lifetime skills that apply to our personal and our professional lives. And it also helps manage our doubt. Do I belong there? Is it my place? And these are all emotions. So managing our emotional intelligence, I think, is definitely a tool to help us overcome doubt, overcome that imposter syndrome. You belong, so you should believe that you belong, right?
Fantastic. And back to that mental, whether it's the golf mental game or the business mental game, it's all between the ears, something Steph was talking about with soccer, she knows well. Lisa, wrapping up our panel, any wise words, an article or book you've read, something that stood with you and you want to share with the audience?
Like Karen, I'm gonna pull on I haven't read a book in a while. I've just been busy learning the sport of golf and the business of golf, but anyone who hasn't read it yet, I'm going to reference the Serena Williams Vogue article where she announced her retirement. It resonated with me in so many ways. I didn't know she was one of 5 sisters. I'm one of 5 sisters. And the thing that really resonated, I wrote it down, so I hope you don't mind, because I didn't want to get it wrong, was I want to be perfect. I know perfect doesn't exist, but whatever my perfect was, I never wanted to stop until I got it right. So we've talked a lot about vulnerability. We've talked a lot about authenticity. So I think that relates to being your genuine, perfect self, because it's authentic.
I absolutely love that. And bringing that authentic self to every boardroom you're in, to the golf course, to your community initiatives, to the world of sport, wherever it might be, showing up with your true authentic self as you strive for your perfect. And that will look differently for each person. Lisa, Caroline, Pam, Karen, thank you so much for your time, for your insight, for all the valuable lessons you shared with me and everyone here today. Can we have a round of applause for our panel? On that note, it is now time to break for lunch, so please enjoy your food, mix and mingle, take the opportunity to network, and we'll resume at 1 p.m. for our next session. But I will talk to you all in a bit. Awesome, I love it. That'll get you pumped up. Well, I hope you've all been enjoying your lunch and have taken away some helpful nuggets from our first two sessions, Power, Passion, and Perseverance, and our Women of Impact session. It is now our final panel of the day, and we're going to focus on a discussion that's extremely relevant in golf today, which is the importance of getting more women, particularly women of color, involved in the game. Leading this discussion will be Marcia Gay Knight, who has worked as a sports marketing professional for over 10 years with notable companies like Mosaic Sales Solutions, Rogers, and the National Hockey League. Currently, she's a partnership marketing manager with CBC Sports and Olympics, where she works with production and partners to weave brands authentically into the Olympic story. She's also the founder of Black in Sport Business, an organization that aims to connect and encourage the presence of Black professionals in the sport business industry across Canada. Please give Marcia Gay a warm welcome. And Marcia Gay will be joined by two trailblazers in golf, including Clemmie Perry. Clemmie is the founder and executive director of Women of Color Golf, a nonprofit organization based in Florida whose mission is to increase diversity and inclusion in the sport of golf for women and girls through instruction, on-course play, mentoring, networking, special events, health, and career-related opportunities. Women of Color Golf also includes a mentoring program called Girls on the Green Tee, which is designed for girls aged 10 to 17 and college students to answer the ever-present need for strong, accomplished, and resilient female role models. Please join me in welcoming Clemmie. And lastly, I welcome up Tina Skier. Tina is a member of Black Lives Matter Golf, an initiative founded in 2020 by the Black members from Grandview Golf and Country Club located in East Preston, Nova Scotia. In response to the reignition of the global Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, members of BLM Golf wanted to apply that same equity lens to the game of golf. And so on August 20th of 2020, the inaugural Black Lives Matter Invitational Golf Tournament was held. Since then, BLM Golf has grown to over 120 participants and was awarded the Community Sport Organization of the Year by the provincial sport organization Support for Sport. Please welcome Tina. And on that note, I'll turn my hosting duties over to Marcia Gay. Enjoy. I can't wait to listen to the session.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Ladies, I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you so much for taking the time and having this amazing and super relevant discussion with us. Let's start diving into it. So, Clemmie, you have created this incredible organization of women of color in golf to encourage more women of color to learn and play the game. What is your experience in golf, and how has that inspired you to build this organization and address the issue of lack of representation in the sport of golf?
Okay, so my experience in golf is, initially, I was new to the game of golf. And I didn't have any experience 8 years ago. I was a corporate executive in aerospace and defense technology and electrical distribution systems and smart grid technology. So my background was very technical, and I had worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies. And what happened is I ended up losing my job. And I'd always wanted to play, and it was like, well, I finally got time. And I was driving back to do consulting work at a job in Miami, and my youngest brother found an old set of golf clubs sitting on a trash pile, and believe it or not, on the intersection of PGA Boulevard and Prosperity Road. And he said, you're going to take those clubs and learn how to play when you get back. Well, of course, I just lost my job. I didn't want to spend any money, and I'd always been an athlete. I played basketball, I swam, I was an NFL cheerleader. And I said, well, I know I could shoot a hoop, but I don't know about this little white ball. And so I asked the other brother, I said, I don't want to spend any money. I said, so for Christmas, I want golf lessons. And the other brother bought me golf lessons, and I will tell you to this day, I never looked back. And I used my severance package, and I started Women of Color Golf, because immediately when I started playing, I realized that there were not many women that looked like myself. And it saddened me. And I started looking into the statistics, and the statistics told me a very glaring story. And that story was about 24 million people played golf. 4 million were minorities, and less than 1% was a woman of color. And I immediately got myself engaged in the golf industry, and what inspired me, Marsha, was 4 wonderful minority women in the golf industry in Tampa. And the first inspiration came from Dr. Renee Powell. And if you've not heard of her, she is the most decorated Black woman in America in golf. She is the second African-American woman to ever play on the PGA Tour. And she is a PGA, LPGA member, and she was just inducted into the PGA Hall of Fame with Tiger Woods. She is my mentor, she has been my North Star, and she has guided this mission of Women of Color Golf for the past 8 years. And there is no Women of Color Golf without Dr. Renee Powell. There is also Dr. Mike Cooper, who led the First Tee and founded one of the First Tee programs in Tampa. He led a grassroots organization. Gladys Lee, who is an LPGA professional, Class A, and then Jan Bell Jan, who is one of 12 women in the world that design golf courses. So I had 4 incredible mentors that took a person that had never played golf and guided me through this mission. And in less than 8 years, we have trained 1,500 women, and I have traveled the world, and I'm here in Canada today.
Amazing. Can we get a clap for that, please?
From a little white golf ball.
All of that from a little white golf ball. So, Tina, no pressure on your end at all, because I don't know what your stats are like, because I know Clemmie came ready to go. But can you tell us what inspired you guys to start a similar organization here in Canada, and what the value of it was, what we were looking for, why you started Black Lives Matter Golf?
Well, Lindsay really touched on a lot of what I was going to say. What really got us going was the death of George Floyd and many others like him in the States. So the Black members of Grandview Golf and Country Club, which again, Lindsay had already mentioned in her intro of me to the stage, decided, and those members, to be honest with you, are men. So every one of those members that started Black Lives Matter, did the inaugural Black Lives Matter golf tournament, were all men. And so they decided that they didn't want to remain silent, and so the tournament happened. But what came out of that tournament was the committee. So four of those men decided to form a committee out of the golf tournament with 2 big initiatives, 3 initiatives, but the golf tournament was one of them, but 2 big initiatives, those being the Junior Mentorship Program, which is where we started a program for BIPOC youth, ages, at the time, last year, ages 12 to 18. This year, we lowered the age to 10 to 18, where those youth can come and get lessons, not have to worry about paying for those lessons, because we'll take care of those, as well as the equipment. So one of the barriers for youth of color, BIPOC youth in particular, is the economic barrier. So we as a committee wanted to break down those barriers by saying lessons are free, using the facility is free, the golf equipment is free. So we have about 24 sets of golf clubs that those children are able to use when they want, not just for the sessions, but if they decided they wanted to go and do 9 holes or 18 holes somewhere, they just go to the clubhouse, which they're housed at, and go and say, I want those clubs, borrow those clubs, bring them back, that kind of thing. As well as t-shirts, hat, gloves, balls, the list goes on. So they don't have to worry about that. And that was the main focus when we first started. The second is a scholarship program. So Black Lives Matter Golf had started a program a scholarship fund last season. And the owner of Grandview Golf and Country Club, who is a racialized man himself, had donated $3,000 for our scholarship last year. And Black Lives Matter Golf was able to fundraise another $7,000 to bring it a total of $10,000 that we were able to give out in February to 4 students going on to post-secondary education. And this year, the owner of Grandview reinvested again and provided another $3,000 to us for that scholarship fund, for which we are hoping to fundraise another $7,000, hopefully more, with donors and sponsors and stuff, to give out more scholarships this coming February during Black History Month for us here. But then this year, the fourth initiative, which we just started this year, was introducing women of color, BIPOC women, to the game of golf. And so that, along with me and 4 other members, so we included 5 new members to the committee this year. Me and another lady and 3 other gentlemen, joined the committee this year. With me and the other lady, Lillian Ash is her name actually, heading up the women's program. So again, another way of us getting more women involved in the game. And then, to be honest, a lot of them came to us sort of at the end of the junior mentorship program last year and before the tournament. A lot of women, a lot of aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews of a lot of the black golfers at the golf course were like, well, what about us? Like, why couldn't we be involved in getting some lessons and stuff? So that being said, we thought, you know what, the program needed to be added to the Black Lives Matter Golf Committee, and that's what we did this year.
Okay. I love that because you guys are trying to tackle different issues within the sport and find different ways to solve those issues. But I wanted to ask you specifically, like, regarding barriers and different restrictions in getting into the sport. You listed a couple of them right now by just letting us know, but are there other things that are restricting participants of color to get into the sport? Either one of you can let me know. Like, Clemmie, are you finding that other than economic barriers, or are there any other barriers that you've realized as black women or people of color in general are facing getting into the sport of golf?
Yes, there are barriers because I will say initially when I started playing, I had to figure out, since it's a sport where you don't see yourself, typically as a woman of color, it's easy for us to get into basketball because there's not a heavy economic cost, or track. And we're typically guided to those sports because of that. That's where you mostly see us. And so I had to figure out very quickly as I was playing alone and driving and just out there playing alone, and I absolutely loved it. I had to think, like I was taught to think in corporate America, how are you going to fix this solution? You have to change it, because I heard the stories of Renee Powell, and I knew the stories from my parents of why we were not in the game, because it was all very historical about why blacks had not been in golf. And I knew the stories of racism and segregation and discrimination from listening to my parents at their dinner table. And so I said, this was wrong and I have to figure this out. So what I did was, I said, well, education was always important to people of color. So I partnered with the community college and started running the classes through there. Then I realized, regardless of what color you were, we were corporate executive women, we wanted to get through it quickly. So I knew that time was another factor. And then I realized cost was another factor. So I ended up writing my own curriculum with the PGA professional, Mr. Jim Wright, and I created an accelerated blending and learning approach to get a corporate executive woman like myself through a class very quickly. And then I partnered with, initially it was an indoor training facility because Topgolf wasn't around at that time. And so we did an indoor blended training approach, and then after that we took them to an on-course play, and then Topgolf came, and then I created a partnership with Topgolf. And I'm pleased to say that Lynn Morgan and myself and my staff, we recently piloted that accelerated blended training approach in Houston, Texas with Milana Dodge, one of the only African-American PGA, LPGA professionals and the only general manager that is African-American woman in the United States with Aramco Oil, which is the largest company in the world, and they're bigger than Apple, with 10 Saudi Arabian executive women. And our Likert scales reported that we got all 10 results.
So more importantly, when are you coming to Canada to do this? Because I need to get on board with this whole training session.
We're ready.
I know, we're ready. I'm always ready. So let me know when you're coming over here so I can get myself together.
Right.
I wanted to ask Tina, what's the vision that you guys have for Black Lives Matter Golf? What do you, blue sky, barriers none, what do you guys want to accomplish with the group?
Well, foremost, we'd like to see, if I'm being honest, you know, I don't know if it's going to be something that'll happen next year, but it would be wonderful to see our youth, any 1, 2, 10, 20 of our youth going through our program on the amateur circuit, on the LPGA tour, on the PGA tour. Be nice for Canada, representing Canada. Because right now, I watch golf. I love to support our Canadian golfers, both PGA and LPGA, but I have yet to see one that looks like me. And I think in order for our youth to want to really be involved in this sport, I think they need to see someone like them out there in Canada. I mean, you know, Tiger Woods was great for the game, and it got a lot of us here interested as well in playing amateurishly or recreationally, as Clemmie says. But I have yet to see anybody take it more, take a more professional look to it, and I think we need that.
Yeah.
I think every sport needs to have that diversity, that that lens that all of our kids can look through and see themselves at, whether they're African Canadian, whether they're Asian, whether they're from another marginalized ethnic group. All of us should be able to see 1 or 2 people that look like us out there doing any sport or every sport. And to me, that's my focus. That's what I would like to see. But I understand that's long term. Short term, I think we just would like to make Black Lives Matter Golf more sustainable, keeping the sponsorships long term, you know, having sponsors that recognize what we're doing is important, and wanting to be involved with it for the right reasons, not just because something political or something out there in the news right now, and it'd be great to come on board at that particular moment in time. But in a year later, when we come back to them to see if they want to renew their sponsorship, sorry, they can't do it. And that's, to me, that's a little disappointing and a little heartbreaking. And so we're hoping that we can get some long-term sponsors, and we have a few. Grandview Golf and Country Club is fantastic. The last 3 years, they are our champion course. That's the course that we have the tournament. That's the course where the youth do the lessons. That's the course where the women's program started and will continue next year. We had, it's a little off topic, but we had about 60 plus women join our program this spring. And the ages ranged from early 20s to late 70s. We had a 76 and 80-year-old woman for the first time pick up a golf club and decide to try whacking the ball. And let me tell you, that 76, 80-year-old woman can hit a mean ball.
I bet you can. She has experience.
You know, and that's one great thing about golf, is that it's a sport that you can play until your old age. Right. As long as you can pick up a club and still have the strength to swing and the coordination to hit the ball. The sky's the limit, and I think that speaks volumes for this sport.
For the sport. So cultivating talent is super important.
Yes.
Understanding that we're building the framework for long-term development and growth because we want to be able to see the representation in the sport in a professional setting, in an amateur setting, and for us to be able to say, we belong here.
Yeah.
We believe we belong.
Yes.
Here, right? Which is super important. I mean, I've heard recently that a famous athlete has retired. If we could get Serena to come back as a golfer, wouldn't that be like absolutely amazing? We need to work on it. I think it's something that we can work on.
She can teach really good high
She knows how to wax something.
Oh, yes, for sure.
So I think she would be a great candidate for representation in that aspect.
Call her up.
We'll call her up. Anybody knows her, call her up. So we wanted to talk a bit more about the idea of intersectionality, the idea of different social identities as women, as mothers, as religious pieces, all these different elements that make up who you are as a person. So looking at your career and your long-term development as a professional, how has that helped you guys kind of navigate the space where you are now, where you're able to set visions and goals for your organizations, and how has that built you up as a person as you go through different adversities with your organizations? Anybody?
Let's go in order. Go ahead, Clemmie.
So I think for me, I know when I looked at that question, I did a lot of self-reflection, and then I realized most of my career jobs had been all male-dominated, and I was in fields that were primarily white male-dominated fields. I didn't really realize it until I was asked the question, which were STEM-oriented, particularly for a woman that's a baby boomer, and so I had been in electrical distribution systems and smart grid technology. I'm just moving along, living my own life, not think, color wasn't, I was just doing what I loved. And then I moved to aerospace and missiles and fire control. And then, of course, I was involved with the National Football League and now golf. So that was just all things that I absolutely loved. And I just realized that being in those spaces, it just gives you an opportunity to be able to assimilate, just very easily, and you have something just in common with, different groups. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, it just gives you an opportunity to have a different perspective, a different voice at the table. Because what I've realized is a lot of my counterparts that are not like me, you learn from the different experiences. I learn from them and they learn from me. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And then thirdly, I definitely realized that you can't truly understand exclusion unless you've been excluded.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. That rings a lot. And Tina, for you, how have your experiences kind of cultivated your motivation to kind of keep Black Lives Matter Golf going? And why is it so important to you?
Oh, jeez, that's a loaded question.
It's loaded.
I've never one for a lot of inspecting sort of me. Like when those questions were like, it had me thinking about stuff. And I don't know. I work in a position, I work for the provincial government. So I'm a public servant. Mm-hmm. And I've been a public servant for 20 plus years. So that's given me the ability to talk to the public. Joe Blow, just a regular person. Somebody may call and be upset. I have to navigate how to work with that person who's upset to get to the root of the problem so I can help them. So I've been, as a public servant, I'm sort of, and I think that as a mother and as a woman anyway, that we are built to sort of help people and encourage, and so 20 plus years of doing that in the public servant, I think I have a tendency to do that in my personal life as well. So with Black Lives Matter golf, because golf ended up being a passion, didn't start that way, had no intention of playing golf. Somebody decided to buy me golf lessons for Christmas, so I felt I had to use them. And from there, a love of the game happened. But after seeing these women, mm-hmm. this summer, going through our program, and the joy that they had up there swinging the club. A lot of times they missed the ball, but when they did, it was like, and they were still happy even after they missed the ball. So I really enjoyed seeing that. It gave me so much joy, and it was such a beautiful thing to see that I want to continue to see that. So for me, that's what I want. That's what I personally want out of it, is to continue to be a part of their growth, especially with the women. The youth, again, during the tournament, I tell this little story. So each year at the tournament, it's broken. It's a tournament, so it's golf, 4 people on a team. It's a scramble format. We have 2 mentors, a woman and a youth. And so this year, I was fortunate enough to get paired as a mentor with my brother, who was listed as a mentor. He's still new to the game, still has some work to do, but he was good. My husband's aunt, I don't know how we end up getting all these family on my team, but my husband's aunt, who has been golfing for, I think she probably was golfing longer than me, and this lovely young woman named Courtney Diggs. Now, I met Courtney for the first time, because I wasn't part of the whole mentorship program. With the kids, but I met Courtney that Saturday, and she was just there. She seemed like she didn't want to be there, and it was early. I mean, it's kind of early for kids, right? You know, we teed off at 10 o'clock. They had to be at the golf course by 9. Anyway, but trying to get her to smile at first was like pulling teeth. But I made her smile, which made her talk. And anyway, so we had a blast. And I was out there giving her some instructions, hitting the ball. She seemed like she didn't want to do it, but she did it. And we developed this great, nice, I don't know, camaraderie out there. Took a great picture with her. And we joked back and forth, and she enjoyed herself. And she hit some great shots out there. That's what I like. And that's why I want to be involved, and why I want to continue, and why I want to see where this leads.
So you're encouraged by the joy of golf?
Yes, oh, for sure.
Yeah, when you have a good game, it's very joyful. When you don't have a good game, it's not so joyful. I'm happy that they still have joy.
I always leave the golf course happy.
Always.
It only takes one shot to bring me back.
I'm happy if they have the banana bread. Once they have the banana bread, I'm very, very happy out there. I wanted to talk to you ladies also about the topic that we've been hearing coming up in the last couple panels as well, the whole idea of imposter syndrome. And to speak specifically from a realm of a black woman, in your experiences of imposter syndrome, Clemmie, you working in an organization that's predominantly white male, and you stepping into those roles and excelling, but also stepping in a golf realm as well that's predominantly white male, do you ever feel like you don't belong here? And how do you question your presence or question your ability in those spaces? And if you do, how do you overcome your imposter syndrome?
Well, being a woman of color and a person of color, you learn very early that your life is going to be different.
Correct.
And in those environments, you have to discern very quickly how you're going to address it. You know, is it really worth addressing? Do I really know this person? You know, or is it something where you care enough about the person, you may want to say, you know, let's have a talk about that. You know, come sit side by side. Or is it a situation where you are now maybe going to have one of those more difficult conversations? So you kind of very quickly have to discern how you're going to address that in a corporate environment. In the golf world, I will tell you a story. When we started Women of Color Golf, I took some of the members initially, and I won't name the golf course, for their first field trip. So part of our training, a lot of them have never been to a tournament. And these are some of the things you can do. You can invite, you know, some ladies, just take them to a tournament, explain it. Explain what's going on. Invite them to a Golf Canada tournament next year and explain what's happening. And we were all, you know, dressed alike. I made sure I explained the attire, what was going to happen. And they were so thrilled and so excited. And we all rode a bus from Tampa to where we were going. And we looked so cute and we're proud. And it was about 8 of us. And when we got there, you know, they were not used to seeing 8 black women show up together at a high-end golf tournament. And I will tell you, when we got there, we got the stairs, but we, you know, we kind of just explained to them what, you know, was going on and what was happening. And I will never forget it, because I was like, oh my gosh. Most of the people thought we were there to work the concessions. And my heart dropped for those ladies.
Because they put their best out there, and their best was received very differently. Were they still encouraged to play? How did they bounce back from that?
Well, we weren't playing. It was a training opportunity. They had never been to a golf course. So me and the instructor, Lynn Morgan, who is a white female, so she's learning as well, which is a learning opportunity for her, what we now experience as a person of color.
In those environments,
when we enter a space where we're normally not there. So it's a learning experience for her as well as she's teaching those classes. But as a person of color, you know, when we talk about, you know, the microaggressions, you know, those are the kinds of things that typically happen to us on a daily basis when we enter a space, particularly in number, where we're not usually seen.
And that's why the representation is so important, to normalize those situations so they're not as polarizing for someone else to say, oh, this must be A or B, correct?
Right.
So Tina, for you, a similar question regarding imposter syndrome. How do you guys navigate the space knowing that it's not typical for Black players or typical for Black golfers to be in this space? And do you question yourself being there? How do you guys push through that?
Well, I can only speak from personal experience, and I never felt that way. So I always enter a facility or a space or an event like I belong there. So when I go to a golf course, for the most part, it's me and my husband that normally are golfing together, and it's just us. I don't, for the most part, other than Grandview, which has a large Black membership, we're usually the only two people of color on the golf course. And we may eventually see somebody near the end or at the beginning of a round, but for the most part, it's just us. So we just go out and play. You know, we're fortunate enough to be playing with other members or other people on the golf course. For the most part, they're white, that are very nice and accommodating, and we strike up good conversations. But my husband and I are very, very pleasant and outgoing, and we strike conversations and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't mean that we don't still get a few stares here and there when we're out there, or some, you know, people that we're partnered with are a little tight-lipped and don't want to speak and all that kind of stuff, and we're just out there playing our game. But I don't pay attention to all that. To me, that's background noise. I'm there to enjoy the game that I really like to play in the summertime. And that's what I'm there to do. And you know, if I can make a nice friend or two on the way while we're there, that's great. But for the most part, no. What the imposter sort of feeling happened briefly, coming into this situation. After, you know, hearing and seeing all these wonderful speakers and stuff, I felt a little like I didn't belong to a certain extent. But it didn't last that long. I felt that, you know what, I was asked for a reason. And even though my experience is still new into this arena, it is still a voice that should be heard, and our story out there, so that people understand sort of how this gets started, how we start to build and move forward into something, hopefully, what Clemmie has established in the States. You know, we'd like to be on that scale, maybe surpass it.
Exactly.
Maybe have Clemmie come, you know, like building those relationships and stuff, right?
Thanks for saying that. Thanks for sharing that and having that vulnerable moment with us. I wanted to ask you both, on the mission of increasing numbers, especially of women of color in the sport, what can people do to support you? What do you need to cultivate more numbers? What do you need to galvanize more support? What do you need to get the word out there? Like, what do your organizations need for support right now?
I think what most, at least for us, because we're still fairly new, but I think Clemmie will probably say the same thing. We need the funding. We need, and the funding doesn't always necessarily have to be monetary. The monetary is huge, but I mean, in-kind contributions, you know, are great. Again, I go back to Grandview Golf and Country Club. They have offered their facility We're not paying for that. Their pros are coming to actually give instruction. We have a number of mentors, again, Black members of that golf course come out every Tuesday, because that's when the junior mentorship program happens, to help instruct the kids as well as the pros that are there. But we need some, I think, more help from other courses, other pros, other golfing establishments in Nova Scotia, because that's where we are, to sort of say, you know what, I think there's something I can do with that. I think I can help. Maybe I can offer some women's clubs. Right now, the clubs we have are geared more, they're not youth clubs, but they're still not geared for a woman kind of thing, right? You know, the shafts and all that technical stuff that goes into golf clubs. You know, other supports, as in, you know, maybe we should, I don't know, involve more women or young girls into some of our clinics, integrate them with, you know, some of the lessons and stuff that they're having with some of their other students, like just stuff like that. Like, there's so many things that they can do that I don't even know about, but they should know about. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff, I think is really important for them to really step up and see that there is a gap at their facility and to make way for it.
And similar for you, Clemmie, as Women of Color Golf grows, what support do you need to carry it to where you see it in the next 5 to 10 years?
It was interesting. I was having that conversation with Lawrence at breakfast this morning, and I'll be very honest with you. So if we really want to grow golf, because I've been in the trenches, like I said, with the mentors that I've had, and really to grow it, particularly with minority women, golf is going to be grown at what Tina and I are doing at the grassroots level. You've already got it here at the tournament level and at, you know, the competitive level. You've got to grow it at the grassroots level. You've got to grow it at the recreational play level. You've got to grow it at the collegiate level, particularly, I can speak in America. I'm not quite sure yet because I haven't done it for the Canadian research, but in America we have a lot of historically Black colleges and universities. You can help to tap into that area. And then it was like Tina said, volunteers, the pros, in-kind donation from the pros, and of course sponsorships. And the biggest thing is with the grants. And let's talk about philanthropy for a moment. I will tell you, and you can look it up, there is a report that was done by the Ms. Foundation in 2020. And that report is about, it's women of color, all women of color, BIPOCs, indigenous, everybody. Okay. And that report talks about, its title, Pocket Change. You can Google it. And it talks about how women of color do more with less. And in the philanthropic world, there's about $69 billion that's out there to give away. And a woman of color organizations like Tina and ours and Asian groups and BIPOCs, we get 5%. And that equates to $5.48 per woman or girl of color. So I think we as women have to pull this thing together and really support each other. And you can Google that. It's called Pocket Change by the Ms. Foundation. And it's true when we say the struggle is real, because Women of Color Golf was primarily self-funded by myself. Yeah. I just happened to have been put in a position where I could do it. But you know, and I've had, like I said, I'm getting very fortunate now where I'm getting these kinds of opportunities that I could keep it alive. But for me, it was about passion. I came from a background of a struggle of African Americans that was very deep-rooted, that kept us separated. And my 94-year-old mother kept telling me, because of what she went through, that I could not stop.
Right, you have no choice.
You know, we know about not stopping.
Yeah.
And so I kept doing it. And you know, now things are starting to turn around for us, but any support that organizations can get, but if you really want to grow it, you got to grow it at the grassroots level, the recreational level, and the collegiate level, not where we are already at.
You have to send the elevator back down, essentially what you're saying. As we close, I wanted to ask you guys one more question. I wanted to ask you, if there are people out there who have something that they want to start, something that's on their heart, you guys have both taken a leap and done something that you are passionate about, how would you encourage other people to be brave enough or to be bold enough to step out and start something, because you've done great things and you're helping so many other people? How would you encourage others to do the same?
Oh, geez. Again, I'm one of 8 people on a committee. So it started, to be honest, start small. It doesn't have to be anything huge. You don't need to be this big grand gesture to make a big difference in your community. So start small. Whatever you're passionate about, do something small with it. You know, if you want to coach and you want to coach basketball, sorry, my daughter coaches basketball. If you want to coach basketball, then, you know, coach basketball. Start small, you know. Teach your little brother or your little sister. Things like that, like that generates I don't know, a passion or a feeling to move forward, and trying to do something bigger, and then expand on that, and then grow with that. Again, we came a long way in 3 years. I don't think I think we hoped for it, but I don't think any of us expected Black Lives Matter Golf. And me, as a representative from that committee, to be sitting here 3 years after we started the committee, to be sitting here speaking at a Women's Leadership Summit. But we're happy that we are here. But it started with 24 men wanting to not remain silent after the death of George Floyd. And that's how we started. And we still want to continue in doing more things. I mean, the other thing that comes out of that junior mentorship program is conversations with BIPOC youth about social injustice and inequity in society as well as in sport. A lot of those youth play other sports, you know, basketball, soccer, whatever. But I think just start small. Don't feel like you have to make a big grand,
right?
Because that just will overwhelm you, right? It's starting small and
build,
volunteering at whatever, and then building a network that way. I think it's the best way to go.
Noted. And for you, Clemmie?
Definitely start small. The first class I had only 3 students. I've been at it a while now. But definitely, you know, believe in yourself. You know, I had never picked up a set of golf clubs, although I love sports. And don't let anybody ever tell you that it can't be done, because, you know, my story is definitely the untraditional way and the untraditional path to get into golf. And that little white golf ball will definitely change your life. If you're a woman and you are not playing, I will tell you that you know, you are limiting your income, you're limiting your opportunities. Women that play typically earn 17% more than their other counterparts. You know, 90% of corporate CEOs play golf. So, you know, regardless of, you know, what your nationality is, we want every woman sitting in here today and listening to play, because it is absolutely going to change your world in some way or form.
Great connections are made on the golf course.
What's that?
Great connections are made on the golf course.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I will definitely close with a quote from my mentor, Dr. Renee Powell. And she taught me this from her father, Bill Powell, who built the first Black-owned and operated golf course that still exists today. So I would encourage everyone to donate to Clearview Golf Course. And the quote goes like this. Wait a minute, I just got
We're gonna get it right. We're gonna get it right. Yeah.
And the quote goes. Wait a minute, I just got so nervous when I think about it. She said that the golf ball does not know the color of our skin, and the scorecard does not handicap us by our race. Life should be more like golf. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you both so much for sharing with us today and also for doing what you're doing. Understand that the impact is being felt. Be encouraged to continue doing awesome things because I know in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see the fruit of what you guys are planting. So please continue just being awesome and doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm going to throw it back to Lindsay. Is that what you guys professionally say? Look at me. I'm going to throw it back to Lindsay to wrap up for our next session. Thank you guys so much.
Cassie, would you like throw it back in a little lingo going on? My goodness, that was a fantastic panel. Thank you so much, Clemmie, Tina, and Marcia Gay, and ending with that quote from Dr. Renee Powell, extremely impactful, and just talking about growing golf at the grassroots level and how important that is. We're now going to give everyone a chance to stretch your legs, mingle with an activity in support of the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. If everyone could please join us at the back of the room. You can see some of our helpers in the back there as well. We have some cocktails provided for you. So network, mix, and mingle will also be joined by Dr. Lougheed, Chief of Cardiology at CHEO, to introduce the activity. So enjoy, and then we will circle back around for our keynote later on this afternoon. Okay. I hope you all had a chance to stretch your legs, mix, and mingle. Can you all hear me okay? Thumbs up? Okay, awesome. Well, Arlene Dickinson, you don't need much of an introduction, but I'm going to give you one anyways because, my goodness, you ever have a resume. Arlene is a serial entrepreneur and general partner of District Ventures Capital, a venture capital fund focused on helping market, fund, and grow entrepreneurs and their companies in the food and health space. She is a 3-time best-selling author, podcaster, and accomplished public speaker. Arlene is widely recognized for a role as a Dragon venture capitalist for over 12 seasons on the multi-award-winning CBC television series Dragon's Den, which I am a big fan, love the show. Her leadership has been recognized many times, including Canada's Most Powerful Woman Top 100 Hall of Fame, the Pinnacle Award for Entrepreneurial Excellence, as well as Profit and Chatelain's Top 100 Women Business Owners. She is a Marketing Hall of Legends inductee, a proud recipient of the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Award, and served for many years as an honorary captain in the Royal Canadian Navy. Please put your hands together for our keynote speaker, Arlene Dickinson.
Thank you.
Well, Arlene, we have a lot of different topics to dive into, but we're obviously here for the CP Women's Open and the CP Leadership Summit. So perhaps we can talk about some of the parallels in golf and business as a perfect place to dive in, because you play golf yourself. How many rounds do you get in the summer, usually?
This year I've had 0. But I do golf.
All right, well, then that means
this year I've had 0.
you just got to get out. You've been too busy.
It has been too busy.
But golf can be a predominantly male field, business, and entrepreneurship can be a predominantly male industry. What parallels do you see between golf and entrepreneurship?
Okay, so before I start, I have to say to everybody, I'm just going to apologize for the fact that I'm up here in sandals, looking like a beach bum of some sort, because I really wrecked my knee. So just so I'm giving you an excuse as to why I'm sitting up here not looking super professional like she is.
No, I think you look
right now.
I think you look fabulous. and you got these great orange toenails, which I don't know if people can see, but I love the color. You look
And I also
phenomenal.
have this lovely knee brace in case you think I'm just, faking it.
Well, that makes sense for no golf yet this summer, but hopefully golf later on.
That's why I can't golf. That's it. So I remember back in the day when I was first starting out in business, and my partners were big golfers. And so they would always say, well, we're off golfing, and they would never invite me. And I was always so, pissed off about it. I thought, why aren't you taking me? And they would say, well, it's the guys going. And it really bothered me a lot. And I thought, okay, well, I really don't know how to golf. And so one time my partner said, oh, come on, come with us. And we went to the Glencoe Club in Calgary. I don't know if any of you are from Calgary, but the Glencoe's a fairly high-end golf course. And, lots of rules and everybody keeping their time. You've got to be exactly, whatever on time. And so I stood up to the tee, and I'm all confident, and I've got my new outfit, because I've got to look the part, right? I had all dressed properly and stood up, and I must have duffed the ball 30 times. I could not connect. I'd never hit a ball in my life. And of course, I could just hear all the guys groaning and, kind of going, oh, this is going to be the worst round of our lives. And it was at that moment I thought, if I want to participate in golf with them, if I want to be part of this business opportunity, which is what I think golf sometimes is, because you have 4.5 uninterrupted hours with somebody playing with them, I better learn. So I took some lessons, and it only took me a few tries before I actually got good enough that I could connect with the ball. I always say now I kind of golf, if I can shoot around 100, I'm pretty happy. Sometimes I've shot a little bit less now, but generally I'm right around 100, so I'm okay. I'm not breaking any course records.
Hey, that's not the goal out there. It's to have fun and play and make friends. And
Although they say that everybody who says that is lying, that they hit around 100.
It's just to have fun. I am having fun.
Yeah,
I am having fun is the mantra.
But I did find that it was very interesting golfing. You know, there was definitely a dynamic of, you know, the guys, when they're teeing off, the men's change rooms, and after that I've joined many golf courses since then and golf clubs since then, and even the women's locker rooms, everything is so different. Like, it's just such a different experience. You know, I remember walking into the men's locker room once, you know, on a tour, and I was thinking like, wow, this is like amazing. And the women's was like quite a bit smaller, but the fees were the same. So it was always kind of a very much a male-dominated sport. But I think that's changed dramatically over the years.
Absolutely, and there are a lot of parallels not only between golf and business being male-dominated, but also solo adventures. And entrepreneurship is very often a solo adventure at first. Later on, you might get a team, but there's many times where it's just you. And golfers out there, yes, there's a team supporting them, but at the end of the day, it's just them up on the tee by themselves. What has golf taught you about yourself and perhaps the mental aspect of golf that you've carried over to other parts of your life?
Well, you made a really good point. When I started to really get into golf, I really did begin to understand that it was a game of me against me. It wasn't a game of me against anybody I was playing with. It was really about my own personal objectives for the game, you know, getting back into the game when I mishit something or when I didn't have a good shot, and being able to get myself mentally back at it so that I didn't let that failure overwhelm the rest of the game. And being in business and being an entrepreneur is exactly the same. You're constantly you're constantly dealing with these mistakes that you make, and you can let them stop you and ruin everything else that follows afterwards, or you can learn from it and take it forward with you as a lesson to, you know, not get in your head, but also something that you can remember what you did wrong so that you don't do it again. So a lot of similarities in terms of just being able to manage your emotional and mental mergers of your EQ and your IQ and your physical physicality all coming together, and that is really what being in business is all about. It's managing your emotions in a good way.
And trying to take that confidence onto the golf course is something, again, very applicable to you and your career. And my goodness, you exude confidence. We've seen you on Dragon's Den. You'll go toe-to-toe with Mr. O'Leary. You do not hold back. Where did that confidence come from?
For me, it was, I'll tell you, when I first went on the show, first of all, I didn't really want to do the show. I was, you know, asked to go on the show, and I didn't really want to do it. I hate public attention. I'm very much an introvert. You know, people say that. I really am an introvert. And so I didn't want to go on the show. And my kids said to me, Mom, why don't you want to go on the show? It's going to be great. And I'd say, well, I don't want to go on the show because people are going to judge me. They're going to look at me. They're going to look, you know, look how old she is, look how overweight she is, look at her wrinkles, look at all the physical stuff. And that was what I was focused on. And so they kind of convinced me and said, Mom, you should go on the show because nobody really watches that show anyway.
You're like, okay, thanks.
They said to me, what are you worried about? No one's going to see you because it's year one, right? There was a very small audience. So I thought they're right, I should do it. I always tell them to try and push themselves to do stuff they're uncomfortable with. So I'll do it for that reason. And I remember sitting down in the audition, and that's what I'm going to try and answer your question. I was in the audition for the show, and it was me and 2 other women, and I really wanted them to get the part. I didn't really want to do it, as I said, and we were sitting down, and I was sitting beside one of the other dragons, whose name I won't mention, but you know who he is. And it was me and him and these other 2 women, and what they did that day is there was a soundstage very similar to this, and they had a couple cameras on us, and they would bring the cameras out, and they literally did not give us any instruction. They just said, you've seen the show, we're going to bring out some entrepreneurs, you know, do your thing. And so I thought my job that day was to let these other women get the part, or the seat, and I would go home and tell my kids I tried. And so I sat there, and they were bringing out entrepreneurs, and I wasn't saying much, and at one point one of the producers came over to me and said, Arlene, the idea is for you to talk. And I went, yeah. I'm thinking, I didn't look at my watch going, just want to get home. And then towards about about an hour into it, they had brought out an entrepreneur, and she came out and she started talking. And as she was talking, I, for the first time, was really engaged with the conversation she was having with us. I started to really pay attention. I thought, wow, she's really been through some hardships. This is a story that was pulling at my heartstrings. I could feel her emotions. I could feel the pain she'd gone through building her business. And so I was listening intently. And as I was listening intently, the fellow who was sitting beside me said something mean and nasty to her. I know you're all shocked at that. And I had this moment of justice warrior overtake me. I honestly did. I forgot the cameras. I forgot everything else. I forgot why I was there, and I defended her. And I spent my time kind of going, saying he was being such a jerk. I looked at him and said, "Why are you being such a jerk?" And I didn't know the guy from Adam, and she was standing there watching this fight between us. And he said, "Oh, you came in here on a broom," and I said he was a jerk, and we were going back and forth. And anyway, I found my confidence in that moment because of what I was trying to defend, which was the right for people to have a voice and to be heard and to give them the respect that they were due. And so confidence can come from many places. It didn't come from me feeling confident about being on the show or trying out for the show. It came from a confidence of what I knew mattered and what was right. Just to finish that story, I went home and my kids asked me how it had gone, and I said, I will never hear from them again. And they said, "Why not?" And I said, "Yeah, it didn't go well." So the next day, CBC calls me the next day and says, "We'd like you to do the show." And I said, "You're kidding me." And they said, "No." And I said, "But I fought with your guy." And they go, "Yeah, we really like that." And I went,
like,
oh, shoot, I really messed that up. But the confidence is something that, it also comes, it's easy to talk about confidence, I think, as you age and have experience in life and in business. You become more confident for me, I've become more confident. I'm more confident in my skin and who I am and how I appear and, all of those things than I ever was. And so now I think less about what people are judging me for. I'm happy to apologize that I didn't dress appropriately, but I'm not worried that you're saying, oh, you don't like my shoes. Whereas before I would have thought, would they like my shoes? Have I got the right outfit on? Have I dressed properly? So I think it's something that you learn and something that you suddenly just find yourself caring a lot less about what other people think of you, except for what they think of you relative to who you are and what you stand for. And that's what matters to me now. I'm much more focused from a confidence perspective that way.
Well, you mentioned what's important to you and kind of identifying those values, even in the audition for Dragon's Den. And I know now you do a lot of philanthropic work and you give back tremendously to individuals. How did you identify those values? What was that process like? And finding out what really matters to you and your why?
So my why has changed over the year, but I always say that, people always tell you to follow your passion. I am a big believer in following your purpose. First of all, you have to figure out what your purpose is, but following your passion, to me, passion follows purpose. If you're doing what you think is meaningful, you will have passion for it. I can love to golf. I can be passionate about golfing. I can love it, but that doesn't mean that that's giving me the purpose I need in my life to do the things that I want to do with my life, for me particularly. So I think it's really important to follow your purpose. And so the why has changed for me. When I first started in business, it was putting a roof over my head and feeding my children. I had 4 young children. I was a divorced single mom. I needed to figure out a way to survive. And so that was my why, was getting up every day doing those things. But as I've grown older, and as those things have become less, I've taken care of those things. My family's in a good place now. Now my why is about doing something meaningful for our country and making sure that I'm giving back to a nation that has let me do all the things that I've needed to be able to do and wanted to do in my life. And I believe all of those things, my taking care of my family, thinking about how I can help the country, thinking about entrepreneurialism, started with my mom and dad immigrating to Canada. And they came over to Canada. We literally had absolutely nothing. We had $50 to our name. We had to sell everything that we had in South Africa to immigrate from Africa. At the time, you couldn't take any of your wealth out of the country. You had to leave everything behind. And so we came to this country as poor immigrants without anything. And literally, we didn't know what a winter coat was and mittens, and, we didn't have anything. And those growing up, growing up in poverty, and we did grow up in poverty, all my clothes came from the Salvation Army or were hand-me-downs from somebody else. I didn't have any new clothes until I was old enough to buy my own. And those are the things that I think created a value set that was very important, which is things and lessons that my father in particular and my mother taught me, which was to be grateful for what we had. My mom and dad would tell me every day that we should be grateful that we lived in this country. So I was raised every day hearing, you should be grateful to grow up in Canada. You could be somewhere else in the world where you didn't have the same opportunity. You should be grateful that you have the freedom to do what you want to do here. And we also were taught generosity. We were taught this idea that, if you weren't giving to others who had less, then you were really making a mistake in terms of being able to help society, which was giving you everything. So we were taught that society owed us nothing, that we owed society everything. We were taught to be grateful. We were taught to be generous. And we were taught to believe in ourselves to the extent that nobody else was going to do it for us, that we had to do it for ourselves. So those values have stayed with me.
Incredible. And from your humble beginnings, just the perseverance and the adversity you've overcome to get to where you are today. You touched upon a time in your life that I'd like to rewind to, when you were 31 years old, with 4 young children, no savings, and recently divorced. Walk us through what you were feeling in that moment. I know you've mentioned a time you were crying on your father's couch and some of the tough lessons he taught you, but turn back the clock to that time as a 31-year-old. What were you feeling in that moment?
A lot of terror and a lot of fear, but mostly I was just feeling that I didn't have a choice other than to get going and get on with my life. And so we all, people often ask me, how did you raise 4 children, or how did you do that? And I always go, it wasn't an option. I didn't say, I can raise the kids or I can't. I had the kids, I needed to raise them. So I had to figure out a way forward. And so I think what I learned was never to not be prepared to walk through a door in order to figure out what you're capable of. In other words, we have to take risks. But back then at 31, I didn't know what I didn't know. I had no education. I have a high school degree. That's all I have. I have no post-secondary university education. I have no skill training. I was never, no trades or anything like that. I was never trained in anything. But again, I come back to Canada. I could do what I did because I was in a country that let me try. And unfortunately in Canada, I'd say the negative about our country, if I can, is that there's too much of a safety net for people. It's too easy to not take risk. And so a lot of us are taught that it's always going to be okay. We'll always have healthcare, we'll always have education, we'll always have these things. And so that actually lulls us into a false sense of security around not pushing ourselves too hard, because we're always going to know that we're going to be able to survive in this land. And I think that has actually worked against entrepreneurs in our country. But a little bit off topic there, but I do think that at 31, I just felt I had lots of energy and I wanted to solve my family's problems, so that's what I did.
Well, you say the motivation at that point in your life came to take care of your children. As your career progressed, where did the motivation come from? And right now, what would you say motivates you on a daily basis?
I am my family will always motivate me, but where my motivation came from as I expanded my career was just working with other people. I don't really like thinking about what I'm going to do to be successful. I really like thinking about how I can make somebody else successful, because I've always believed that if I make somebody else successful, my success will be part of that. And I don't mean financial success, I just mean how I feel about myself. So it was important for me that everything I did in my career was about helping other people with their lives and their careers. But I will say, because I know this is about, we're celebrating, female leaders, so I will say that it is harder for a woman to feel like they can take care of everything and feel like they're going to get the support that they want to have. And so my why became very much about trying to still be a woman. At the same time, I was navigating a man's business world. And that was very difficult. You want to hold on to your feminism. At least I did. When I grew up, I really wanted to still be a woman. I still wanted to be feminine. I still wanted to wear dresses with, balances. I didn't want to have to wear a three-piece suit in order to be able to fit in. And that, I mean, I'm going back many years where that was the case, where you went into a boardroom. If you didn't kind of look like a man, you weren't going to be treated the same way. And so I feel like part of what I was having to do was uncover what I was comfortable with as I was growing up to figure out how I was going to find what I was going to do. And that's part of my why. Part of my why was figuring out how I was going to stand up as a female while doing it in a male-dominated world, and that was difficult. But when I think about my why today, it has evolved a lot because I now am in I know how lucky I am. I'm so, so, so lucky. And I think about all the good fortune I've had, and I really want to help Canada's agriculture and health industries and entrepreneurs in those sectors to succeed. We spend a lot of time in our nation talking about energy and how important it is. And of course, energy is very important. I come from the West, so I'm going to say energy is very important to this nation. Clean tech, all of the types of energy. But we don't spend enough time. You know, I have this big fundamental belief that no ingredient should leave this country without value being added to it. We are a great country of exporting our raw goods and our raw ingredients to other nations who then take them, turn them into products, and we buy them back. And that has never made sense to me. So I've spent my last 5 years of my life, 6 years of my life, building a venture capital fund in this space. I've created Canada's first accelerator in this space. We've put $1.6 billion into the Canadian economy as a result of the things I've done in the last 6 years in that space, in the food and health space. So it's been, my purpose is, let's help entrepreneurs succeed and build products from Canada and export them as opposed to exporting raw goods.
Wow, incredible. And you are such a leader in the energy space, in the food space, entrepreneurship at large. But what was that journey like for you in finding those leadership qualities and developing them? I know you talked about confidence a little bit, but was there a point when you really started to hone in on those leadership abilities?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I know I often think about how, again, I just keep reverting back to how I felt I had to behave. You know, I felt like I had to be a little bit more masculine than feminine in how I was a leader. And so my leadership style has evolved a lot, where I used to be more like, okay, I have to make a decision, and I have to be firm, and I have to not be as emotional about things, and I have to be, you know, much more aggressive than I wanted to be. And that did impact me personally. That kind of acting that way and behaving that way in order to be a leader actually changed me a little bit. And when I started to recognize that it was changing me as a human, I tried to just change back to being a little more like who I really was. And sometimes that can be considered weakness in business, but I just don't care. I mean, I am who I am, and I think it's okay to cry at work, and I think it's okay to have emotions, and I think it's okay to say you don't know the answer. And I think it's fine to be vulnerable. I think it's fine to sit in front of you all and say, I don't know sometimes what I'm doing. I think I don't. There's lots of times I'll get, you know, offered something or asked something, and everybody looks at me like, you know, like, you're going to have this brave answer, and I'd go, I don't have a clue what the answer is, and that's hard to admit when people want you to have the answer. So.
And that's something we talked a lot about earlier today, just being authentic and your genuine self. I think something that you've been a champion of as well, whether it be through your podcast or your book, is reinvention and knowing when it's time to change course. So walk us through what reinvention means to you.
So I think there's a process of reinvention that we can all do, but to me, reinvention is allowing yourself to be who you want to be, and not doing it because your parents want you to be something, or your friends expect you to be something, or your family needs you to be something. It's about being who you are and being very true to yourself, because I think, again, many women get trapped in lives that are about pleasing others and doing things to make them feel better. So, and actually we all have those friends in life who will try and capture you into what they want from you. Like they'll say, you'll say, I think I want to do this. I want to, I'd love to really open a cookie company, and because I make great cookies. And I'll look at you and say, yeah, that's a great idea, Arlene, but there's a lot of cookie companies out there. Do you really want to do that? I don't see you doing that. Like I call them frenemies. They're really not your friend, because they really aren't going to support you through things, because they're very comfortable keeping you exactly where you are in their life. They don't want you to change and evolve. So I think reinvention is all about giving yourself permission to do the things that you want to do and be the person that you want to be, without fear of letting somebody else down and without fear of failure. You will fail. We all fail. That's what life is. So reinvention is letting yourself do those things and not being afraid of it.
And you've mentioned in your past, you've personally reinvented yourself 3 or 4 times. Mm-hmm. What did those reinventions look like?
Well, the first one was I'd say that I married when I was 19 years old, so I didn't even know what I didn't know at 19, although at 19 you couldn't tell a 19-year-old that they don't know what they don't know. But at 19 years old, married, I was in the Mormon church, so I was like raised as a Mormon. In that church, it was very strict. I was not in a profession. I didn't have a career. I just had my children, which I wanted to be a mom. That was what I wanted to do. And so that was kind of my foundational first me. And then when I went through this ugly divorce, I had to reinvent myself as suddenly somebody in business. I knew nothing about business, and I had to figure that out. And then I had to reinvent myself as a TV personality, and somebody did public speaking and writing books and what that was about. And now I've reinvented myself as a marketing person, and now I've reinvented myself as a venture capitalist who is building this ecosystem to help, Canada. So if you all went through your own heads right now and you just thought about your journeys, you've all reinvented yourself on a regular basis. The problem is that most of us wait for something catastrophic to have happened in our lives in order to get to reinvention. A divorce or a sickness, or something happens, we lose our job. So that impetus is what makes us go forward and reinvent ourselves. And I think the real beauty of reinvention is that you shouldn't have to wait for something to happen in order for you to get to what you really want to do. You should be able to just do that at any point in your life. So, there's a thing called golden handcuffs where you're kind of stuck in a job because you're paid well and things are going well. And so many of us get in that track where we're happy with what we've got, but we're not really happy. We're in a great job, we're making good money, but it's not really making us happy. And it's hard to leave that. It's hard to leave that and take that risk and say, I'm going to do something completely different because it's really what I want. And so I think that's where regret comes from. If you don't try it, then later on you go, I wish I had, because now I'm 30 years in that same job and I kind of hate it. Not necessarily. I'm not talking to any of you. I'm sure you all love your jobs.
Well, I love that you mentioned sometimes it is hard, because that was going to be my follow-up. There must be some fear associated with that, because yes, you talk about confidence and leadership, where your values come from, but that doesn't mean at certain points, I'm sure there wasn't some fear and trepidation. How do you personally handle the feeling of fear when it does creep in?
So there's always going to be fear in life. And I will say that I suffer from anxiety and from panic attacks. So for me, fear shows itself in a very interesting physical way. So if I wake up in the middle of the night with a panic attack, or I find myself, having anxiety attacks in a situation, it could be in a situation where there's nothing going on. I'm just sitting at home by myself and I suddenly have an anxiety attack. And I don't know if any of you have anxiety attacks, but they're really quite overwhelming. They take over your entire physical being. And I'll think, well, that's nothing going on. I'm just sitting here. And then I'll think through, okay, what's going on in my life in general? And I'll realize that there's something happening that's got me feeling afraid, or has me feeling somehow, concerned or worried about something. So I think the way through fear is to face it. It is the only way through fear. The way I've dealt with anxiety is to just face it, acknowledge it, know that it's nothing wrong with me. It's just how my body reacts to things. So fear is, if I can stare down Kevin O'Leary, I don't care. Nothing's going to make me.
Got nothing. Well, I appreciate you mentioning mental health, because it was part of our conversations earlier today. And I know it's something that you've said earlier in your life, when you weren't experiencing it, you didn't really understand what people were talking about.
No.
And then you experienced it yourself, and it completely changed your perspective. How did it make you a more empathetic and sympathetic person and leader at large?
So my daughter had bad anxiety, and my daughter's beautiful. She's like a talented, when I say beautiful, I mean talented and smart and incredibly high EQ. I've got 4 children, and all my kids are great, but this one daughter in particular, my youngest daughter, had really bad anxiety, and she would talk to me about it and say, I've got anxiety. I'm thinking, what could you be anxious about? Your life is like great. You've got everything that you could possibly want, and I really didn't understand it. And I tried to, I was sympathetic to it, but I really didn't understand how it could overwhelm her. So it wasn't until I got it, which I didn't start getting anxiety until later in life, that I went, wow, have I ever missed the boat to what this does to people? And I felt really bad about how I had kind of blown it off. And so I think, you know, listen, how we treat other people and how it's made me a more effective leader is realizing that we never know what's going on in people's lives. We don't know. People can come to work and show up perfectly great. You know, recently had some fairly tragic events happen around our lives, and you don't know what people are going through. And the more understanding you can be, and the more sympathetic you can be, and the more you can let people just be human, the better not only will you be, but for sure the better off they will be, because you don't know what they're going through. So that's how it's helped me. I now, as a leader, think about, well, what's going on? What's the context? Why are they feeling this way? Just like I asked myself when I was getting anxiety, what's going on? We have to ask ourselves why other people are feeling the way they're feeling, and seeing if we can help them.
And I think at the end of the day, in sport and in business, it's people at the heart of it, and it's relationships. And something I wanted to know, you shared your father instilled multiple values in you, and something he taught you was society didn't owe you anything, but that you owed society everything, and a real focus on community. So how have you kept that focus on community, on supporting others? Because I think there's a lot of men and women in the room today who are trying to build that community, whether it be in golf or other industries, and build up the next generation. How has what your father instilled in you helped you transfer that to the next generation?
My dad was a big believer in, you know, I don't know, there's a proverb about planting a tree now so that somebody else can sit in the shade of it 100 years from now. And I think that's what community is about. You know, we are in a very instant gratitude, instant reward kind of, you know, I want to do something, I want it now. So our phones, everything we can order now, we can get it delivered now, we can buy it now, we can think about it now and get it tomorrow. Whatever we want is at our fingertips. And that doesn't build community. Community is about long-lasting vision and about trying to create an opportunity for the next generation to live a better life than you have today. And that's hard to do when we're so self-centered. We are very selfish. As humans, we're very selfish. Community isn't about selfishness, it's about unselfishness. And I think that requires a real outward view of how you impact others, what you can help them to do more effectively, and how your community actually is going to become a safer place to live. And community is everything. I grew up, any of you remember community centers? No, you're all too young. There was this thing called community centers where in every community you would go, and that was where all the activities would happen. Do you remember that?
We had a community center in my neighborhood, yeah.
And I used to love that because you'd meet people that lived in your area and you would get to know them, you get to know who your neighbors are. And it makes me think about Mr. Rogers for some reason. I think about Mr. Rogers and his sense of community. And all of you, if you haven't gone to his Twitter feed or to read anything about his story and his quotes, spend some time. If you're thinking about building community, spend some time with Mr. Rogers. He will show you what community is. He will teach you how to think about, you know, your neighbors and your friends, and to rid yourself of biases. And I just have so much respect for what he did in terms of building community and thinking about taking barriers down and thinking about making feeling like everybody was equal.
Absolutely. I think Tom Hanks plays Mr. Rogers in the recent movie,
so
right?
Yeah.
But there's some very valuable lessons in that movie. I remember rewatching it and thinking there are some great takeaways. We will turn it over to the audience for some Q&A before we let you go. But a question I would like to wrap up our discussion with is when thinking about legacy, and I know you've mentioned reinvention multiple times, and at certain points in your life there were different priorities, but when you look back, what do you want your legacy to be?
That's such a hard question to answer, but I really hope that, because it's hard to believe that anyone's going to remember you for long after you're gone. So I hope that what I've done is planted the seeds of confidence and hope and aspiration in other women and other people. I actually don't like just singling out women. I know this is what we're talking about here, but and I know I've done that a few times in my answers, but I just think treating each other with humanity is really a legacy I'd like to leave, and I don't think I'm there yet. I've got a long way to go, and I want to focus on just helping our nation be stronger in that essence of equality.
Well, I know you're a mentor and a role model to a lot of people, and you've been leading the way. As we now turn towards the audience for a chance for questions, if someone would like to raise their hand, we have a roving microphone in the back. So I got plenty of questions I can keep asking, but I have a feeling there's probably some burning questions in the audience. So, we got a question from Pam up here. We can get a mic, or you might have a loud voice, and feel free to even project.
Thank you for being here. Question for you is, can you tell us about a failure you've had and what you've learned from it?
Oh, I've had so many. How long have you got? So probably the most recent failure I've had, in 2007, I guess it was, was that 13 years ago? Yeah. There was a flood in Calgary in Alberta that pretty much destroyed my marketing business. And here I am on television, successful businesswoman on TV with a marketing company. I was doing many other things at the time. I was on television, I was writing books, I was public speaking, I was involved in other investments. But my marketing company is what I was known for. And my marketing company got pretty much wiped out through that flood. And it was a huge failure for me. Like I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought people are going to look at me and say, yeah, you're you're a dragon, but look at your business has failed. And I couldn't even compute how I was going to get past that. And so I thought people are going to think I'm really not good at what I do, even though I have all this other success. All I could focus on was this big failure with this business. And not that the flood was my failure. The flood, I had no control over the flood. The failure was that I had never planned for some eventuality that something bad could happen. I wasn't ready for it. I was blindly just going along, just doing what I was doing, and I wasn't prepared for something bad to go wrong. And I felt like that was a huge failure. That took a big toll on who I was and my confidence in myself and my ability to be transparent about it. I never thought I would even talk about it in public, let alone, I didn't even want to admit it, that I had kind of failed in terms of making my business strong enough to be able to withstand anything like that. But it turned out that that's what's the impetus for me to start my fund. And it turned out that that was the reason that I had to reinvent myself. And it turned out that I could turn a bad thing into a good thing. But it was at the time a big, big failure. I remember going to my bank and he was saying, like, Arlene, just shut the company down. Like, it's done. Like, what are you doing here? Like, you're wasting money now. And I said, no, I can't let my team down. I've got all these people working for me. I have to keep going. And he said that was a failure. Like, that was a failure of business to care so much about them that you were going to waste money. And I kept saying that, like, no, I've got to do the right thing here. So my story really is failure often is a disguise for a lesson that gets you to where you really want to be, right? Failure, that's all it is, actually. It's just a lesson. And that's what that lesson was. It was a hard one, though. It was very hard.
And sometimes hard to see that with the shadows above you. You're just like, there's a lesson here somewhere. But it's hard to see the sun peeking through.
I've also failed at playing golf this year, apparently.
But you will get out. You will get out. Do we have any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand. Oh, I see one. A couple here.
I don't have a question, but it struck me a bit when you were talking. You answered the question on legacy. I would just share with you that a very powerful legacy you have is the brand and personality that you have on Twitter. It is incredibly powerful, and I look for your messages as an incredible, and yes, female leader. I just want you to know that has an impact further than you know.
Oh, thank you. That makes me emotional. You know, like Twitter is, it's such a cesspool, isn't it? It's such a horrible place to live in Twitter or on social media in general. And I remember I can't remember how many years ago it was now, but I was laying, just a few years ago, I was laying in bed and I'd read something about a mosque that had been attacked. And I was reading the story about this mosque being attacked, and that's why I made emotional about it. And it made me cry. I was laying there in bed, and I was crying, reading about the story, and I thought, holy smokes, this world is messed up. And I hated that I could see it on Twitter. I hated that there was all these stories and pictures I didn't want to see. And then I thought, okay, well, what can I do about this? And I thought, the only little thing I can do, I can only do one little thing. I can try and be a positive voice on Twitter. I can try and talk about the things that I think matter to me. Sometimes they're not, but do it in a positive way. And when somebody disagrees with me, disagree with them in a positive way as opposed to in a hateful way. And that's been my, try not to, get mad at people, try not to point fingers at people, try not to, but still have an opinion. That's a difficult line to walk because when you're opinionated, it's hard not to somehow come out as against somebody. But I feel like that's something each and every one of us can do, is to have a voice in social platforms that is more positive, but also is unafraid to voice an opinion. The Lisa LaFlamme story is a great example of where we need to voice opinions. We need to be strong about what's being done there. No matter what the reason, there is no good reason. And so it's very important to me to talk about what matters. And thank you for saying that. That actually does make me feel really, really good because I care a lot about what I put out on social media.
Well, thank you for sharing that story and your vulnerability. And I think a lot of us in this room appreciate you being a positive voice because they are too rare and few and far between.
Such a mess.
And you're also a leader in that space, inspiring other people to bring a positive voice, which does make an impactful change. So thank you for that. Lisa, you have a microphone.
First of all, I just want to say I love your slides. I'm going to go treat myself to a pair. And I just have a light, fun question. Is there a story behind your injury? What happened? How did you hurt your knee?
I was playing, 1-on-3 basketball. No, 3-on-1. I can't even make up a sports analogy.
We'll hire you on sports.
I'm trying to think of something real. Yeah, I was going to say you come up with something. I'm trying to think of something really exciting to tell you. I literally stood up.
Well,
I wish I had something to say. Nothing. I have nothing. I literally stood up wrong. Twisted it somehow.
That's not good.
I said to my daughter, he said, "What did you do?" I said, "I don't think I did anything." I was playing ping pong the day before. Rigorous ping pong. That's what it was.
It's probably that. You slept on it, and then it was the ping pong injury.
That's what it was.
I think we have time probably for 1 or 2 more questions. Yeah.
Do you think it's better to focus on your strengths or build your weaknesses?
I was having this conversation with Steph Levy earlier. The question was, do you think it's better to focus on your strengths or your weaknesses?
Oh, geez. You're asking somebody who constantly is thinking about what I'm not good enough at. So I think I focus probably a lot more on my weaknesses. But I'll tell you, having said that, so I think in business, it's really important you focus on your strengths. I think in life, you somehow tend to focus more on your weaknesses. And somehow you've got to find that middle ground in both. So to me in business, I'm super confident about knowing what I know in business, but in life I'm still very insecure. So I'll focus on my weaknesses in life and my strengths in my business, but I think it is probably a little bit of both. You have to be self-aware enough to know what you're good at and feel confident about it, but you also have to be self-aware enough to know what you need to work on. And so I think you could become really arrogant if all you do is focus on your strengths, because then you think you're just really all that, and you're probably not. None of us are.
A little bit of both. Okay. Well, I think on that note, okay, we'll do one final question. This will be our last one. Thank you.
Hi.
So bright.
Do your children come to you for advice, and more importantly, do they take it when you give it to them?
Oh, geez. So to my kids, I am mom. I am not the woman on TV or the one who wrote the book or anything, right? The books or whatever. Like, so my kids, they've had a really hard time because of the shadow that they live in because of my public persona. And I really often feel very sorry for them, but they do take my advice sometimes. Not always. But I'm very close to all 4 of my kids. We spend a lot of time together. They all are very different children. They're all adults now. I have like 6 grandkids now. Like I've got a 21-year-old grandchild, which is crazy to me. And I'm close to my grandkids too. Like they come to me, they try to come to me, and that my daughter who's in my business will come to me and she'll say, I just need you to hear me as my mom right now. And they will ask me to think about, we're talking to you as mom. We're not talking to you as a business person or somebody who wants to give us business advice. We're talking to you as mom. And that makes me think a lot that I need to kind of think differently about sometimes how I respond to them, because it's hard when you're a leader. You're always constantly going home and trying to lead there too. And you take some of those same mannerisms and characteristics with you into your home. But they'll tell me, yeah. They're unimpressed by everything else, I can tell you that. They're unimpressed by it all. Somebody will take a picture and they'll go, why do they care, Mom? Like,
No. That was like when they told you people don't watch Dragon
Yeah,
Den.
that too.
And look
Yeah,
what
that
happened
too.
there.
That
You're like,
too.
I think otherwise.
That's true.
Well, Arlene, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for
My
your
pleasure.
vulnerability, your insight, your wisdom. Can we have a round of applause one more time for Arlene?
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Well, that almost concludes today, but I'm going to turn your attention to our screens for a quick sizzle reel, and I am then going to invite, or do we have another sizzle reel? No. Okay, never mind then. On that note, I'm going to invite Liz Hoffman up to the stage, President of Golf Canada. Thank you, Arlene.
I'll hobble off the stage right now.
That's good. I'm going to walk off with you.
Okay.
One more round of applause for Arlene Dickinson.
Thank
please.
you.
You think you know golf? Think again. This is a game of passion, precision, and skill. The bold, the ambitious, the new generation. It's a hit harder, drive further, scream louder way of competing. Welcome to the CP Women's Open.
All right, we do have a sizzle reel, and that gets us excited. And one more reminder that you do get a free ticket to the CP Women's Open this week. So go out, see the women on tour. My goodness, it's incredible to watch them play, and I'm so excited for the golf ahead. Before I hand it over to Liz, I would just want to stress how much of an honor and privilege it was to be your MC today. I really enjoyed our panels, our Power, Passion, and Perseverance panel, our Women of Impact panel, our Women of Color in Golf, and a motto that will stick: believe you belong. And of course, a lot of insight and wisdom from Arlene. But on that note, I hand it over to Liz Hoffman, President of Golf Canada. Thank you very much.
Well, what an incredible day. I always look forward to this event on Golf Canada's calendar, and every year I'm humbled by the incredible leadership and compassion that each of you has demonstrated today. To our panelists and speakers, thank you for your insight, your expertise, and your courage to share your lived experiences. The impact of your shared experiences and your determination to find new perspective and drive to perseverance has inspired us all. To our guests in the room and joining us virtually, and it is so nice to be in the room, isn't it? Thank you for your stewardship, your trust, and your ongoing support of the CP Women's Leadership Summit. And once again, to our sponsors, who generously support this amazing and very impactful event. Title sponsor, CP. Our presenting sponsor, ICON. and supporting partners, Audi and Transitions. Thank you, Lindsay. You're just amazing, and for carrying the program today as you did was just superb. Congratulations and thank you. To our co-chairs, Whitney Gorgas and Laura Wilson, and the Golf Canada team that has brought this event to life, you knocked it out of the park. I personally enjoyed getting to connect with so many of you today, and we look forward to coming together for our 6th CP Women's Leadership Summit in August in Vancouver in 2023. And we will remember Tracy's mom. It's really important that you and everyone is included. Do not leave anyone behind. I look forward to seeing you at Ottawa Hunt. Use that ticket and join us for a great week of golf. Thank you all very much. Travel safe.